On the air. Okay, good evening. Welcome to the January 11th final budget hearing. And if you'd all please rise for a salute to the flag. Mr. Leakes, how about leading us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you'd all please stay standing for a moment of silence for our men and women serving us home and abroad. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we've got a pretty packed budget hearing tonight, so we do have a guest tonight for public comment. Jack, would you like to come up and...
My name is Jack Falvey, and I live at 22 Cortland. That's C-O-R-T-L-A-N-D as in apples. I'd like to thank Councilor John Farrell for setting up this appointment, and I'd like to thank the Town Council for the opportunity to speak for many of our citizens here tonight. I discovered that there's a big difference between serving our town as an appointed board member and as an elected town official. I discovered that difference on December 31st, when I spent 7 hours on the town green, personally talking to 91 of our fellow citizens, residents, taxpayers, and property owners. In 25 years of serving on our Conservation Commission and the Londonderry Housing and Redevelopment Authority, I never met an angry citizen. Over the course of 7 hours on that rainy Saturday, I met and talked personally with 91 angry, frustrated, and disgusted residents. As elected officials, you evidently do this all the time, and I now knowingly thank you for your service. It was all new to me, and I'd like to report to you as briefly as I can what all these people are upset about so that you can understand the task that we have at hand. First, everyone agreed that it is too late to lock the barn door. But they also agreed that we must corral this wild horse that past members of this body have let loose in our town. It is how to shape and control what has been let loose that is the issue on the table. We have controlled the growth and development of our town successfully for 50 years with zoning and careful town planning. And we must congratulate all those who have served both as elected and appointed officials for doing so. Because of the actions of a previous town council, we now face a new challenge. How do we deal with the unforeseen consequences of those actions? 15 months ago, neighbors and residents attended a developers meeting in large numbers. They became fully informed when they discovered that the symbol of our town was to go from apples to roofs. The question was, how could this have happened? And now a more relevant question is, what can be done to shape and control what is happening? We know the town council is fully aware of this challenge. Our planning board and our town staff seem to have great difficulty in dealing with a new ordinance and a powerful, well-funded, and well-lawyered developer. Now, this is not a unique situation, as other towns have dealt with this kind of situation before. It's the first time for Londonderry, and some who sit on our boards have now demonstrated to our citizens that maybe they're in a little over their heads and could use your help. I asked the chairman of our planning board, who serves at your pleasure, how we might help him deal with a proposal for a massive high-density subdivision and a legal request to dramatically change the zoning laws and the economic base we have all invested our savings and lives in for so many years. He said, Jack, we need citizen input. I said, Art, let me see what I can do. I spoke to neighbors, and they were upset. I reported back. It was suggested that we talk with the developer and become better informed, as members of the planning board had done. We did that. more citizens became more upset. As a result, when they got down into the details of what the planning board, the town staff, and the developer were working on. I reported this back in public meetings. It was then implied that I was speaking only for myself. I assured the planning board that this was not the case. In this day and age, as in all ages, people are reluctant to come forward and speak in public. To do so on television and be broadcast and recorded further reduces citizen input. One communication advance begets another, and I discovered that while not for everyone, email tends to reduce shyness for some. And real citizen input was available to the planning board through that medium. Just as the televised surrounding seatings of this chamber suited the members of the planning board, it did not suit the members of the public who did not like the idea of going 7 or 8 on 1 with developer attorneys making rebuttals. The planning board did not like their feet being held to the fire by email questions. They refused to deal with over 100 citizen questions submitted them in old-fashioned writing. This has escalated the conflict that I would like to challenge you as a council to attempt to deal with. There's now big money on the table. Every resident of our town has their investment at risk. The developer has millions invested. There has to be a middle ground where the developer gets to build a reasonable project and get a return on his investment, while the investments of the taxpayers are reasonably protected from the results of his efforts. In conclusion, I'd like to present to you signed statements of concern of our fellow citizens. We have 168 of them. We only went out there one day, and if you want more, I'm sure we can go door to door. They came out in the freezing rain, and some knocked on doors of their neighbors to tell you that they are not happy with developments in this situation, and that the developer in question must be made to understand that the rights of our citizens are collectively greater than his rights to build whatever he wants, whatever he may want to build it. And you as an elected town body have oversight and an overview of all the issues on the table. You, by seeking and serving elected office, realize that you are accountable to the electorate and must make every effort to listen to the voices of all of us who live and work and have invested in the town you have sworn an oath to. Please accept these statements in the spirit in which they are given. They were not done as a legal document on purpose, because we all wanted to depend upon your collective good judgment to do what is best for our town in response to the task of trying to shape things in such a way that no harm be done to all of us who have built this gem of a town called Londonderry. Apples may become more symbolic as years go by, and that cannot be helped. In fact, it's natural and a healthy evolution in normal growth in response to the citizens that now live here. It is our hope that future satellite photos of Londonderry, while understandably will not show many apple trees, at least some parts of the image will be other than roofs. And with that, I'd like to present to you 168 signed manifestos. Also, there's a series of questions that were submitted June 8, 2011, that have not been addressed publicly. And some people have mentioned that they were anonymous. They're not. They're all signed by me.
Okay. Thanks, Jack. Okay. Hearing your concern, the council is now made aware with the documents that we have. What we would like to do at this time, seeing this is the first time, there's a lot here we're going to have to consider. So we'll take it under advisement. We'll do our diligence to it, and we need some time to go through this. So we do appreciate the residents that have come out tonight to support you in this endeavor, and I guarantee you we will try to do our best with it.
Thank you.
I just, I do, like I said, tonight's a budget hearing, and we do appreciate everybody coming out, and I'm hoping that, you didn't want to really speak to it tonight, other than a show of support to Jack and being here and having it presented to us. We do have a meeting on Monday night. We have a public comment if folks would like to, ask questions of us. But again, this is going to take some time. We'll give it to the town manager, and the council will also look at it. and we'll all get together and we'll try to entertain in the process and try to figure it out from there.
Okay.
So, but anyway, thank you, and that'll be it for tonight.
Thank
So,
you.
Okay?
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So Dave, as far as that document goes that we just were presented, could you possibly have it so that we can get that scanned and out to the council so we can take a look at it?
I will.
Okay. All right, folks, we are going to start a budget hearing in a very couple of minutes. If you'd like to stay for it, that'd be great. If you want to go, I understand. So if there's going to be a mass exodus, I'd like to do it now before we get started on the budget hearing, so.
John, sit down.
I don't remember him sending one out. That's fine.
I'm sorry? Okay. All right, we're going to start the budget hearing now. Dave, do you want to brief the council on the process for tonight and how we're going to go about it?
Sure. This is the final public hearing in preparation for the town's first deliberative session ever, which would be held Monday, February 6th, 7 p.m. at the Londonderry High School cafeteria. You have copies.
What's the question?
You didn't close the public,
We don't need to close public comment.
so only one person's going to talk at the public comment?
The public comment tonight was a scheduled appointment. It is not a regular meeting. Okay? Okay, Dave, please continue.
Again, the town's deliberative session under our revised form of government is scheduled for Monday, February 6th at 7 p.m. at the Londonderry High School cafeteria. And what you have before you this evening is the warrant, which was amended at your last meeting. But it also has been adjusted by a new article. The council did receive another citizen's petition, which I believe is reflected in Article 9, to establish, I'm sorry, it's not Article 9, I believe it's Article 11, to establish a special revenue fund for the cable department. Now, after you receive public input, just a couple of ground rules pursuant to state law is that the council cannot change petition warrant articles. The voters at deliberative session can change those articles, but the council cannot. So the petition warrant articles which are in the warrant this evening are Articles 10, 11, and I believe it's Article 18, the redistricting commission. Those cannot be changed by the council. Second is that the council you can take additional public comment if you choose to, but you are not required to take public comment on Article 2, which is the bond, since the council by law has already held a separate public hearing on the bond, and so you've met the statutory requirement for that particular purpose. 3, all the other articles the council can, should you choose, is to amend any of those articles to develop a final warrant, which will be signed by the council on Monday evening. You cannot add a new purpose, but you can change any appropriations up or down based upon what the council believes in the best interest of the community. And besides that, I think those are the 3 general guidelines we have for you this evening.
Okay. So folks, what we're going to do tonight is this is the final public budget hearing. What we're going to do is the council will start the discussion off with each article. And from there, we'll go to the budget committee. And from there, we'll go to the public. As far as the bond part of it, we can probably get a consensus from the council now to see how we're going to approach that. So how does the council want to approach the bonds? Do we want to open that up to the public tonight, or are we okay with the process as we have gone through it so far?
My thought is that we've had our public hearing on the bond, so
Okay.
let's address the other article.
Okay.
Fine.
Joe?
I'm in agreement.
John? So what we're going to do is the bond articles have been heard, and those are basically going to be up for a vote for the council tonight. So the other articles, there'll be questions on, will go to the public for questions. Okay, saying that, what we're going to do is start off with Article 1, just to read it into the record.
Mr. Chairman, make
Yep.
a motion that we open the public hearing.
Okay, motion? Motion and a second. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair votes affirmative, 5-0. Public hearing is now open. Okay. Article 1 is the election of officers, so there is no action to take on that. Article 2, bond issue for highway reconstruction. So we'll bring it up to the council. Do we have any questions on the amount that we've put aside to go to the bond? $537,000. Joe?
No, I have none.
Okay. Budget Committee? We'll start with Lisa and work our way, or Todd, do you want to be the one to start?
Yeah, what I thought I'd do is just let people know that, in fact, the Budget Committee met on Monday evening, and we actually went through the articles as they stood on Monday evening, and some of the articles shifted in terms of numbers, so we'll have to address how we address that in terms of how we voted. We did, in fact, vote whether or not we recommend for most of the articles, and we can address which ones we did not and why when we get to them.
Sure.
So what I thought would be a good way to go would be just for me to let you know how the result of that vote, and then turn it over to any comments you'd like to solicit from the Budget Committee.
Sure.
And then open it up from there. I thought that
That's
method
fine.
worked great.
Not a problem. That sounds good.
So on Article 2, the bond issue for the highway reconstruction, the Budget Committee voted 7-0 in favor of supporting this and recommending this for the voters.
Okay, great. Are there any questions from the Budget Committee?
I don't have any questions, just the note that we appreciated the council's intention to stop funding via bond issues, and noted that the total amount was taken down from $1 million bond and put into this $500,000 fund, and then attending that, I don't know what the new article number was, the old Article 16 was to establish a new fund, so we're very supportive of the intention of the town council in that matter.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, we're good. Okay, Tom?
Dave, is it the intent tonight that once we have a public comment, that your expectation is the council will take a position on each article?
And that would allow us to prepare the final draft, the final warrant for the council's signature on Monday evening, that's correct.
So my question is, do you want to take public comment and then vote on each at that point, or do you want to wait till the end of the entire public hearing to vote on each article?
Well, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I was thinking we just, as we go through them, we could take a vote and just keep moving them.
Okay.
That way we can get it out in front of us. Now, Article 2 was a bond. We don't need to go public comment for that?
Well, we had a public hearing on it already.
On the
so-
public hearings, right? Okay. Is the council all set?
Yeah, the only thing I would suggest is, I don't know if you wanted to do this, Mr. Chairman, moving Article 4 to the last item that we would address, because that would probably be a larger item. It's the town budget, so.
That's fine. Okay, I'm fine with that. You guys?
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that the council support Article 2 as written.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All those
Me too.
in favor of Article 2 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, chair votes affirmative. Motion passes 5-0 on Article 2. Okay. Article 3, Expendable Maintenance Trust Fund. Are there any questions from the council on that?
None.
No? Okay, Todd, your floor.
The Budget Committee deliberated quite a bit on a number of these articles. Article 3, the Expendable Maintenance Trust. This year, we did not support it in a vote of 1-6, and that's where we landed on this one. We just felt that this year, it didn't make sense in this climate, and this was one of the items, unfortunately, that, from our position, we decided not to support this year.
Okay. Any other Budget Committee members? Okay. All right, so we have a 1-6 vote. Members of the public, would anybody like to speak to Article 3, the Expendable Maintenance Trust? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the council and the Budget Committee for entertaining public comment. Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, a question for the town manager,
That's fine.
if that's all right?
Yep.
Dave, just approximately, for the purpose of this evening, is it around $34,000? Would that be a one-set impact on on someone's tax rate?
1 cent? That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. So I understand the Budget Committee's reasons for voting the way they did. I attended that meeting. But I did have a question for the council relative to this number, and it's kind of along the lines of trying to find any opportunities to reduce the tax rate as we head out of this evening. I think, as we all know, it's the rate itself that kind of drives the tax bill that taxpayers receive, and the town portion is driven by these policy decisions. So while the Budget Committee doesn't support this article, if the council moves forward with it, I was wondering if you might entertain asking the town manager that if this article could be dropped by 1 cent, by $35,000, if the spirit and intent of what the town manager was proposing and what you're hoping to do with this, if you could still maintain that and also lower the town tax rate by a penny. Some people may think a penny's not a whole heck of a lot, but I think in this day and age, when you kind of look for a penny here and a penny there across the thousands of dollars in the tax bill, it could end up making a difference for some folks. So I just kind of want to throw that out there, that if the council would entertain that, maybe there's a compromise position here that would be more amenable. I don't know.
Well, so I bring that to the council. So what Mike's looking for is to direct the town manager to take a $35,000 chunk out of the recommended $200,000 expendable maintenance trust. So I guess we'll bring that up here for discussion.
When we asked Dave,
Sure.
what does that do to you?
Well, just to give you an overview, is that currently we have available funds besides those that have been earmarked for certain projects or repairs for which we have not received a bill of about $95,000. Historically, the town has appropriated, except for 1 year, $200,000 to maintain all of our town facilities. So if this article does not pass, number one, then we'll have $95,000 to maintain all buildings and grounds for the next 18 months till June 30th of 2003. One thing which we've tried to do when we develop the budget is not only meet the town needs, but also maintain consistency in the impact upon the tax rate. And the town has supported for a number of years an appropriation of $200,000 with $100,000 of that from the undesignated fund balance. So I think in years past, we found a good balance as to what we know our needs to be and the resources necessary to provide those needs. So, we would support that the town continue to appropriate $200,000 for this purpose.
Dave, for example, if something happened where we didn't have enough money, we'd have to go to the voters to get it, right?
That's one of the options you have.
What would a special election cost? 10 grand, 15?
Petition Superior Court, probably 5 there, and whatever it costs Meg, so probably about 11,000, I would think.
So I think it's more of a safety net than it is anything else, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Joe? What's the balance of the town maintenance trust fund?
Right now, we have $95,000 remaining. Unexpended, we have $372, of which $242 is for the highway garage building project. We have $130,000 balance of non-committed, but we do have $35,000 in repairs that are currently underway, of which we have not been invoiced. So the amount of available funding to us is $95,127.41 as of yesterday.
You said what was not accounted for or what was not planned for, 100 and?
There are, currently, without considering the bills that are probably in the mail at this point, is $130,000, and we have about $35,000 out. We have an HVAC repair at South Fire, completion of fuel management, and also some work at Central Fire for $35,000 in total. So the funds that we know are available at this point and are not fenced for any particular projects is the amount of $95,127.41.
Dave, is this the account that the library roof repair came from?
That's correct.
So if we knock this down to 100,000,
Well,
We
we
could
run
change
out,
that
if we run
number,
out of
right?
money, it's gonna cost us $11,000 to go ask for money.
Right.
And we still may not get it, and this may not pass. So, it's, pay me here, pay me now.
In FY11, we had, it was 1 cent on the tax rate. I'm not sure what the amount was back then. The following year, we doubled it to 2 cents on the tax rate. My sense is that we've hit this account in prior years in order to save tax rate. And I have a real concern that we're just shorting repairs that are necessary. And what's going to happen is, while it may be a lower rate today, a year or 2 years from now, it's going to be double what it should be. So, part of my training is as an accountant. You're supposed to match revenues with expenses and costs on an annual basis. I'm just not comfortable with a short-term tax rate increase, a decrease, in order that's paid for by shortchanging necessary repairs. So I'm not in favor of what effectively is a 17% reduction of this fund.
Dave?
this is really like rolling the dice to hope that the economy's
Yeah.
going to be better next year if we didn't fund it.
Well, that's the reality we're in. Dave, what do you have for major projects right now listed, planned?
Right now, we have $242,000 for renovation and expansion of the highway garage. I think you've all visited that facility. And we try to earmark some of these funds on an ongoing basis, recognizing that we'd never would request a bond to correct that or improve that facility. We have HVAC repairs at South Fire Station. We have just received a grant for Central Fire for security measures, of which half is paid from a grant, half is from this fund. And then we have the final payment on the fuel management system for our central fuel depot behind the fire station. Those three projects, HVAC at South, fuel management, and central fire, is anticipated to cost about $35,000, which will be taken from the $130 currently available.
Okay, which doesn't leave us with a hell of a lot. All right. Okay, you had a question?
Cindy Eaton, 16 Clark Road. I don't have a question so much as giving another opinion about supporting this article. I believe that the $200,000 today would get you less maintenance projects done than perhaps 3 years ago even. So if we keep putting this off, $200,000 in another 3 years may only take care of half of the maintenance problems that you have. And I have to agree with Mr. Frieda. It just doesn't make sense to keep cutting this when it's going to end up costing us more waiting, kind of like penny wise, pound foolish. And I, as a taxpayer, don't want to wait. I don't want my taxes to go up twice as much when things are better. This is only going up a little bit, and it's going to take care of what we need. Not really. It should be higher, I believe, but for these times, it'll take care of what we need. So I ask that you support this article.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more question?
Sure.
For Dave. Dave, what was the thought process last year when we felt that 2 cents was enough to get us by and actually have a little bit more to put away?
That was part of the council's policy from a couple of years ago, where essentially they cut this appropriation in half, and then they funded it totally through fund balance. That was in FY10, FY11. The appropriation was increased to $200,000, but we used the 150th fund balance. And last year, it was again, the voters supported an appropriation of $200,000, with a $135,000 fund balance. That's why the difference is in the effective tax rate, is that we've been relying upon surplus for these ongoing maintenance needs.
As Councilor Frida alluded to, though, it went from 1 cent tax rate increase in 2011 to 2 cents in 12, and then we're asking for 3 cents now. So what I guess my question to clarify is, why do we think it was okay to go to 12 to 2 cents? And we're trying to make it up in this year
The
to 3
difference
cents.
is, the difference is the fund balance, the source of the funds.
We took more out of the account. Right.
Out of, yeah.
Out of fund balance
undesignated fund
versus
balance.
from the
Yeah,
tax.
no, I just
base.
wanted to make sure.
You know, if you see the
Took it out of our
next tab, you'll
savings
actually
account,
see
put
it.
it in our checking account.
Okay. So Dave, I didn't get the number again. What's the balance right now? 95,000?
The available balance is 95,127.41.
Okay. All right, well, Mike, I appreciate your idea, but it doesn't sound like the council's going to support that. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to entertain one to support the expendable maintenance, Article 3 expendable maintenance trust fund as presented.
okay, motion? Second. Motion and a second. All right, all those in favor of Article 3 expendable maintenance trust fund signifying by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Me? Nay?
Okay. Motion passes 4-1. Okay, Article 5. Appropriate funds to capital reserve funds to replace ambulances, highway, heavy equipment, fire trucks, and highway trucks. That is a $255,000 in property taxes for a tax rate impact of .07 on the fiscal year 13, based upon projected assessed values. Council, any questions on Article 5? Joe?
None.
Budget Committee?
You skipped Article 5, is that?
We're going, no, we skipped 4, we're gonna move that to the bottom, because it's the biggest thing, and there's gonna be a lot of discussion on it.
Okay, don't mind me, I was focusing on my commentary for Article 4.
Okay. Yeah, Article 4 will be a
They'll come
long
in
one,
routine for
so
use tonight.
Yeah,
just put it in the lock vault for now.
will do. On Article 5, the Budget Committee supported Article 5, 7-0.
Okay, any other discussion from the Budget Committee? Okay, public?
Jay Hooley, 25 Yellowstone Drive. Just a quick question for Dave, if I could.
Absolutely.
Dave, this funding level, is this also part of a recovery plan from prior years? Are we playing catch-up?
Yeah, the original, if the economy had cooperated, which obviously had not in the last several years, the plan was to raise and appropriate $400,000 for this account totally from the tax base with no use of undesignated fund balance. The reason why the appropriation is somewhat higher this year is that the auditor lapsed a South Londonderry sewer project back from the late or mid-'90s, which provided an infusion of undesignated fund balance. So we recommended that the town reinvest those into this fund. Subsequent meetings, as the council took a little bit away and then put some towards the road maintenance trust fund. So that's why it's not at 400, it's at 510. So under normal circumstances, it would be at 400 with totally raised off the tax base. And so where we are now is to raise 510, but 255 off the tax base and 255 out of undesignated fund balance.
But the point I was driving, we're still playing catch-up on this particular set of purchases from prior years, holding back, hoping for.
Yeah, we looked at a 10-year window, looking at the needs and keeping the same schedule we have with all of our equipment, both highway and fire. And at this point, we anticipate that at FY '20, the funds needed to pay for the equipment will be about $703,000 less than what we're going to raise in that period. So we'll have to use a series of what we used in the past, a short-term lease purchase arrangements for some of our fire equipment to get us over the difficult times, then beyond FY '20, which really is making it challenging, is that we're looking to replace the ladder truck at some point in the next 4 or 5 years, which is a significant expense.
So we, moving at this pace, we know unless something changes, we're somewhat underfunding our equipment.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Any other questions on Article 5? Okay. Seeing none? Tom?
I think that, just to keep it in perspective, we've had a lot of discussion about bonding, and maybe stopping some of our bonding and do a change of pace in terms of, pay-as-you-go, build a cash fund, and then pay for it out of cash. This is a good example of how we already have embraced that philosophy in this particular case. We're putting money away in order to replace this equipment with cash, as opposed to borrowing money to buy fire trucks or buy ambulances. Instead of taking a loan, we're putting money away in a savings account, if you will, and so that when it comes time to replace that equipment, we can purchase it without incurring the cost of bonding.
Which is what we try not to do.
So to people that are looking at this article, it's not really 75 to ambulance, 100 to highway, and 335 to fire trucks. It's just really, that's what we intend to spend that money on once we get the funds to the point where we can actually make a purchase, Dave. Is that correct?
Yeah, for FY13, we plan to replace one ambulance. We plan to request council permission to purchase a fire pumper. There are purchases for $125,000 for highway trucks and $18,000 for highway equipment. So you can see by the allocation of the 510 where our near-term needs will be is predominantly for fire trucks and highway trucks.
Just to throw that out there, I mean, what would the total be if we were to expend all the things that we wanted to, like the pumper truck and the highway truck and the one ambulance? What would that be this year?
About 750,000.
Tom? I have no question. Okay. Well, bring it back to the board for vote.
A motion to accept Article 5?
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor of Article 5 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair votes affirmative. Motion passes 5-0. Article 6, establish a capital reserve for fire department equipment. That was recommended by the CIP, wasn't it, John?
It originated there, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so for the council, any discussion on that? Todd?
Yeah, the Budget Committee, as part of its, I believe, a 3.5-hour session on Monday evening, voted to support this 7-0. That's what we felt. We felt this equipment was very important and should not be delayed.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Members of the public, any questions on Article 6?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Mike Brown, 5 Carousel Court, I actually apologize. I don't have I support this article, but I did have one additional question for the town manager before we proceed, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Dave, and I apologize for not asking this earlier, do you have given the way the warrant is as of right now, what the increase is in the tax rate from last year?
I think at this point, it's estimated that the rate would go from $4.74 to $5.08.
Right, so is that a 4-point-something% increase?
About a 7% increase.
7% increase in the tax rate.
Yep.
So just to that was the genesis for my previous question, for what it's worth. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Any other? Yep, go ahead.
Dave, could you, you are the chief, help the public understand the difference between fire equipment in Article 5 and fire equipment in Article 6?
Sure. Fire equipment, Article 5 is limited specifically to, tools that have wheels. Fire trucks, ladder trucks, rescue trucks, ambulances. Article 6 deals with all the other equipment they need, and the department is broken out into 3 general areas. The first area is EMS equipment, and it would fund systematic replacement of such items such as life packs, IV pumps, power lift stretchers, ventilators, and computers. The second area is firefighter equipment, which includes such tools as fire hose, thermal imager, rescue tools, protective clothing, and SCBA, which I believe is the breathing packs. And the third area deals with communication equipment regarding digital audio recorders, base stations, antenna towers, mobile radios, dispatch consoles, portable radios, video security. So they went and they've developed a plan similar to what the council's familiar with respect to replacing our vehicles, looking at the life expectancy of each of these pieces of equipment and attempting to fund adequate dollars so we don't spike the tax rate any one year. So again, this is the first time we've looked at establishing a capital reserve fund to adjust those varied needs on an annual basis.
At the beginning of the meeting, you mentioned that it was acceptable to edit the dollar values in these articles. Did you say we could or could not edit the language at this point?
You can.
I wonder, since in our new form of government, voters are going to see these articles in the, instead of in a town meeting format, they're going to see it behind the curtain by themselves to vote on. So they're not going to have an opportunity to ask questions. Say, gee, I wonder what emergency medical equipment and communications equipment are you talking about? They can't ask that question. So would it, or ask the council, do you think it would be appropriate to put a couple of lines of, for example, and list out the types of equipment that you just answered the question that the taxpayers can't ask in the booth? Could we answer that question for them by anticipating that and put, for example, and list out, 7 or 8 pieces of equipment that are anticipated to purchase? That might help them decide whether or not they want to do that.
As a council consensus, we can prepare that for the...
Honestly, for years, we've challenged that even back when I was on the budget committee to, the more information on there, the better, so I think that's a good idea. So, Joe, Tom?
Yeah, I just had a question real quick on, last year, I think, as I got some information on a few seconds ago, as far as last year, it wasn't funded and then it was actually voted on at town meeting? Is that how that went? This capital fund, reserve fund
This
last
is
year?
the first time the fund's been proposed.
Okay.
What you're thinking of is that was the personal equipment of the firefighter that voted on at town meeting.
It was at 40,000 last year, and now we're asking for 100.
Yeah,
So 2 for 20. Yeah.
Basically, what happened was, is if I recall correctly, is we said, that, let's say we fund 10 suits a year. We said we were only going to fund 5, and then the math basically said we were going to be short a suit or 2. So I think someone submitted a petition, and
Vinnie Curro did, yeah.
and we voted to buy all 10.
And then at town meeting, I think we amended it to take it out of the UFB. So
Correct. That way we
Yeah.
maintain the flat tax.
But the overall support of the community is give them what they need.
So we're not doing the UFB, we're going to go with this and see if the town will approve it.
Well, I
The
think we
full
have
amount.
money in the budget to replace the suits. We didn't take it out.
I guess I'm wondering how we go from 40 last year to 100 this year.
Well, to give you an example, the appropriation for 40 was but for one piece, one tool. There are 19 different tools what they need to replace. So that,
All the more reason why
last
it's-
year's appropriation only addressed one tool.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but I think the gear they wear is about 4,000. And then these tools are Jaws of Life. They have that one truck over there they call the toolbox.
Yep.
It's for all the stuff that goes in there. And then all the stuff that goes in the ambulance. And then the defibrillators and the stretchers. I just remember this all from the CIP committee thing.
Oh,
But it was all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Hold on a second, I just want to clarify one thing. So Dave, before we get lost on the shuffle,
Sure.
To Tom's point, as far as the information on the ballot, could you put that on there? You
This
have a
consensus,
you have a consensus?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Todd?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to point out, I mean, it was made clear back in, I believe, September, when we went on the tours, when this whole process started, to look at a lot of the equipment needs. And the replacement cycle was being stretched, and they were really trying to stretch the equipment. So in our opinion, when we were thinking about whether or not to support this, we just felt this is something that, in our opinion, just shouldn't slide out anymore.
Yeah. A better way to probably describe this is we voted on the stuff that saves them last year. This year, it's the stuff that saves us. It's probably a good way to look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions, Dave, if I may. Dave, this is coming out as a first time, and what does that do in terms of the default budget calculation?
The default budget calculation is only applicable to the operating budget. All the standalone warrant articles are not part of the default, where the citizens can vote up and down individually on each of those articles.
So in the calculation, for example, if the budget, default budget is 250 million, or 25 million, 250 million would be nice, 25 million, and these come out, that calculation, so these come out of that calculation then?
If all one-time expenses were removed from the operating budget, of which we have very, very few,
Okay.
because usually we try to fund, as you know, we try to fund all these one-time capital expenses on separate warrant articles, so they were never part of the operating budget, they were separate.
So it's just a little confusing to me, maybe some others. If this warrant article were to fail, some of the funding for these items was in last year's budget. Last year's budget default calculation is made, and then the default budget passes. Are any of these items funded under your default budget?
They are not funded under the default
Okay.
budget.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Any other members of the public?
Sean, can we get clarification on that, just the default?
Absolutely, Chris.
Because we were discussing the firefighters the other night, and we assumed that if we supported 4 new firefighters this year, they'd automatically be in next year's budget.
That's correct.
You just said these articles are all standalone, so that wouldn't be true.
The fire article's a little bit different, that's an operating expense. These are more capital, so all capital is removed from the operating budget. And the citizens have been voting separately on capital items for the last 10 or 15 years in Londonderry, so they're not included. Similar, to give you an example, a good example from last year is that the citizens voted 2 warrant articles for the operating, actually one article for the operating budget for the fire department, which was the volunteers, to maintain the volunteer call force. And so that call force was included in this year's default, because it's an operating budget. But anything capital doesn't get put in, it just stays separate.
Also, Chris, there's pros and cons here. One is the voters could vote this down and take it to 0. The positive, however, is that this money, if it's voted in, has a fence around it. And even in the bottom line budget, cannot be spent on, I mean, if we run low on road salt, we can't spend this money to fill the salt barn, road salt. It has to be spent on these items. So that's the positive. The money will be spent on its intended purpose in this arena of bottom line budgets.
Any more discussion?
So, Mr. Vice Chairman, I would make a motion that we support Article 6 with the amended language that we have consensus on.
Anybody
Second.
second? I hear a proposal and a second. All those in favor of Article number 6 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Council 5-0. We want to go to the Budget Committee?
Budget committee's all set. They're all set. We're done on that one. Thank you. Okay. Article 7, it's a special revenue account. This is basically for the police outside detail. Dave, you want to just give us a little brief
Sure,
explanation of it?
it's essentially authorization to continue to allow our police officers to work outside details, which are totally funded through the companies or individuals who require that service. It requires no property taxpayer support, and we anticipate that the expenditure for fiscal year 13 will be $564,244. Again, there's no impact on the tax rate. It's money in, money out. It's a revolving account
Right.
to pay for that particular purpose. That fund also pays not only for the officers' wages, but also their associated benefits,
Okay.
whether it be retirement, workers' comp, whatever. And there's also an additional fee for use of the rental of our cruisers, which is used to maintain our cruisers as well.
Okay. Todd?
Yeah, this was kind of an easy one for us. 7-0 to recommend and support.
Okay. And members of the public, any questions on Article 7?
Mr. Chairman, motion to support as written.
Motion, can I get a second? Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor of Article 7 signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, chair votes affirmative, motion passes 5-0, Article 7. Article 8, Fund Sewer Fund. Dave, same thing?
Again, similar to a special revenue fund, however, the statute properly refers to it as a sewer fund, and it's, again, funded by the users of the sewer system, and all expenses are covered under those user fees which are assessed to the users.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Todd?
Yes, just like Article 7, Article 8, the same type of vote, 7-0 in favor
Okay.
to recommend.
Thank you. Members of the public, any questions on the sewer fund? Okay. Back to the council. Can I get a motion?
A motion to support Article 9 as written.
It's Article 8.
Article 8.
I'm sorry,
Second.
Article 8.
Okay, we got a motion and a second by John. All those in favor of Article 8 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair votes affirmative, motion passes 5-0 for the sewer fund. All right, Article 9, Fire Department personnel costs and staffing levels. Dave, you want to give us a little up on that one?
Over the past year, there's been significant discussion between the council and staff and the fire department regarding the appropriate level of public safety services in the community, particularly with the fire department. Our goal currently is to have 10 personnel on for each shift. Our current appropriations does not allow for that to happen in a lot of circumstances. Further discussion with the fire department and the council resulted in a proposal to increase coverage to the coverage goal to 11 per shift. So what you see before you is additional overtime expense, the amount of $76,565, which based upon the average replacement shifts for each of the different categories where we need coverage, sick, vacation, training, on work injury, off work injury, is $76,565, and to fund 4 additional personnel, which would place 1 person on each of the 4 shifts, is another $327,100. So the article total is $403,665.
Thank you, Dave. Okay. So the council, we've had a lot of things going into this, a lot of testimony, a lot of concerns, a lot of talking about it. So I think this is even in this tough time right now, I can't help but support this one, but we'll bring it up to the council for, yep. Well, I was gonna do you guys first. Did you have any questions?
No, you captured it well, that, you know, this was basically our initiative.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess to answer a question that came up earlier, this is one of those articles that will roll into
That's correct.
the default budget next year.
If it passes.
If it passes. Right. Okay. Todd?
Yes, on the Budget Committee side, there was a significant amount of debate on this one. The Budget Committee landed with a vote of 3 to 4 against. I, for one, will like to state on the record that I think that this was a great idea, and I would have supported this. I did support this. However, the vote was 3-4, and that's the way it works, and that's the way it landed. I don't know if anybody else in the Budget Committee would like to expand upon the reasons why they may have been against. I would like to offer them that opportunity to explain why it landed the way it did.
Sure. Okay.
Sean, if you would.
Rich?
Thank you. This was one that we were very torn on, right? Everybody knows that we want to increase public safety. In this regard, I think there's a fundamental problem with the way this is being addressed. We want more firefighters, we want more boots on the ground. The issue here is this overtime. Throughout this whole budget season, I brought it up, I've made it public, my concern about this problem, because it just seems to snowball year after year. The overtime's getting higher and higher. If we're gonna add on fire personnel, I don't wanna backfill with overtime to fill that 10th position and then put on 4 people, okay? I'd be much more inclined to vote for this if we were putting on personnel, not including overtime. If you wanna add 5 firefighters, I'd actually be for that. But I'm not for adding on overtime and just keep that snowball rolling. So that's why I voted against it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a note on that. During our Budget Committee meeting, I suggested that following this period of intense budgeting and analysis that we're going through right now, possibly the Budget Committee could invite the heads of the police and fire to come and address, or at least discuss with us, the overtime policies. This has come up repeatedly during this season, and it's not really an appropriate time for us to get into that level of detail. But hopefully the Budget Committee will have an opportunity to address this when we're not under the pressure of coming to decisions on warrant articles. I would just like to add, this is a very difficult time financially, and I do understand that. My husband and I are retired, so we're those fixed income people you hear about. On the other hand, I have attended a number of meetings and hearings regarding our fire department personnel and the level of staffing. I have a concern about safety. Even with these additional positions, we'll be nowhere near national standards. I think we have a great fire department, and I personally would support the warrant article.
Thank you, Lisa. Members of the public? Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Farmer, 106 Chase Road. Question for Dave. Maybe Susan, I don't know. But Dave, in terms of overtime, when we're looking at budgeted overtime hours, is there actually a cost savings realized through paying some of these types of things through overtime rather than a full-time position?
Well, the chief can add comments as well, but we find that if we're able to be more efficient with our dollars by paying overtime and more flexible. Because one thing which we obviously can't do if we want to attract and retain qualified people is to hire firefighters and then don't put them on a set shift and schedule and have them work when we need them. So we find that it's more efficient for us to fill those shifts with overtime as opposed to paying additional firefighter salaries for shift coverage, not to
Right.
increase the complement, but for shift coverage.
So if you do this through this overtime scheme, and you have a firefighter Jones, we'll call him, and he works as a full-time firefighter, and he has pay and benefits, because that's the other side of this coin, retirement, pension payment benefits, health care, all these other types of associated things. If you're paying him overtime to work an additional 4 hours or 8 hours, you're not paying those additional benefit costs.
Well, we're paying the retirement, social security, workers' comp, but we're not,
Based on his hours total.
but we're not paying the life insurance and the dental and the health insurance.
So there
and-
is some savings.
And the
through
cost
this.
outfit an additional employee, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this article as a taxpayer. I just wanted to kind of bring to light that there was a previous request for a strategic plan by the public safety departments, and I believe DPW, if my memory serves me right. That was a while ago. And this particular item was brought forward to the then council to consider. I'm pretty sure, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that we opted to try to fund this number through a grant, right?
On a couple of occasions.
Right, but I think it was a 4.
That's correct.
Applied for 4,
Right.
in the hopes that we would get some funding for a couple of years of this. So that didn't come to fruition, evidently.
That's correct.
So now the policy decision is to kind of put it out there.
Right.
Okay. So I do support this. The one question that I have for the town manager is this, on the surface, this appears to some people to be kind of a one-time expense because of the way the warrant is written. And I think it would be a great thing to kind of either present at the deliberative or even discuss tonight, if you have the wherewithal to do it, what the ongoing annual costs would be for this decision. So I support this decision, and I'm going to vote for it in the ballot box, but I also know that this is a cost that's going to appear every year, and there's an escalation factor involved in staffing decisions. I think we would all be well-served by kind of having truth in lending, so to speak, for these types of decisions. I don't know how you do it, but the deliberative may be a good opportunity. I think people should really be educated that the cost in FY13 is 403,665. The cost for those 4 individuals in FY14 will have escalated to X and X. I talked about this to the Budget Committee, and I really think we should do that if at all possible, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, it's just you can't put an X number on it now because the different
Yep.
variables increase at different
Yeah.
rates, so
Yeah.
it'd be throwing a dart against the wall
Yeah.
realistically.
Yeah, I thought about that, but is there some methodology that kind of give a percent escalation factor or something like that? I think it would be worthwhile to maybe come up with that for these types of decisions.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Paul?
Thank you. Paul DeMarco, 30 Holstein. I too will be voting affirmative for this article in the ballot box. And Mike had already alluded to one of the things I was going to say, but just to clarify, when I was on the council, we had looked at what was called a SAFER grant. And I believe originally we were going to apply for 4, and or it might have been for putting more than 1 on a shift, and we cut it back to just putting 1 on a shift. But unfortunately, that did not come to fruition, but it doesn't negate the fact that the community does need increased support from the fire department with our growing community over the probably decade or more since the last time they increased staff. So I will be supporting this in the ballot box, and I urge you to give your support to the article on the ballot. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Pauline?
Pauline Karen, 369 Mammoth Road. I have a problem with the way this article is written. A question I have is the additional overtime expense of $76,565 just a one-year item?
No, it's ongoing.
It's ongoing?
That's correct.
Is it going to be $76,565 next year, or is that going to change too?
Well, overtime is a function of not only usage, but of the base salary of the employees. So as the employees have wage adjustments, that number would increase as well.
Okay, so next year, those 10 personnel for additional overtime will have gotten raises. Will have been there longer, so that amount is going to increase every year. I don't like the way this warrant article is written. I think it should have been separated. The overtime should be separate from the additional funding for the 4 firefighters. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, a thought here. If this quantity is 403,665 is assuming that we hire 4 firefighters on July 1st.
That's correct.
So through a pattern of staggering the hiring dates, I would propose that we reduce the 403,665 by 163,550, which would take the number down to 240,115, and take the tax impact in fiscal year 13 from 12 cents down to 7 cents. We still get the 4 new firefighters, but we kind of phase them in, take the tax bite down in fiscal 13, not quite in half, but down 5 cents. They will be fully funded in FY14, assuming they're all on board, but that might be a more realistic method to hire. And I also suggest that if we did that, if that passes, if the council passes that, I'd ask the Budget Committee Chair to re-survey his team to see if they would vote differently on on an article that reflected a $240,000 number instead of a $400,000 number.
Yeah, if the Article 9 was adjusted, we certainly would want to take that under, reconsider, perhaps take a vote to rescind our previous vote for the purpose of reconsideration and taking another vote.
Dave, what's the latest that the Budget Committee can get you there in numbers? Is it tonight or by Monday?
I think they're meeting after this meeting, correct?
At the conclusion of this meeting, we have a Budget Committee meeting.
Because they haven't taken a position on
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would make that motion to support Article 9 at a number that reflects $240,115.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Dave, I had a quick question. It's what was your number?
7 cents.
The number is
240,
240,115. 240,115. Okay, so Dave, my question is, to Rich's comment about the overtime. So, the one thing sitting through years of these hearings, the overtime really for the fire department that you're proposing is basically a fixed cost. And the fixed cost for that is to provide a minimum staffing level at all times. Is that correct?
That's right. What we try to do is maintain 10 public safety responders per shift. We have 4 different platoons, so that's 40. We hire 40 responders, so any vacancies need to be backfilled with replacement overtime.
Right. And what happens when you don't have the overtime built into the budget? What happens to our service levels?
Then our coverage oftentimes goes to 9 and occasionally goes to 8.
Okay. So that's the reason why we're doing it the way we're doing it. So I just wanted to give you an explanation as to what it was. We're not trying to pad anything, we're just trying to put the flexibility in there so that we can still maintain a minimum staffing level on the department.
Okay, don't get me wrong here. I'm not looking at it as you guys padding anything, okay? What I'm saying is...
That wasn't a good choice of words.
Okay. There's an ongoing pattern of a large amount of overtime. In an economy like this, especially in an economy like this, when you put out an application to see how many people want to apply for this firefighter position, how many people do you think are going to apply? You're going to have hundreds for one position, okay? Possibly thousands. All right? When you say that you couldn't find somebody who would take a flexible shift, I have to disagree with that. People will take any job that's out there right now. All right, and that gives you opportunity to lower that overtime over the next several years. You know, you bring in a new person, it gets them up and trained, and it reduces the overtime. So,
Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I would like to ask the operations captain from the police department to come on up and ask him to explain what happens with overtime, if you wouldn't mind, and why it happens, and if you can give us a little bit more detail on it, it would probably help clarify things if you don't mind.
The issue with overtime, it allows us to be able to, as David said earlier, be flexible. 2,080 hours, equivalent to 40 hours a week, 52 weeks out of the year. If we hire an officer at full salary and benefits, it's going to cost us in the vicinity of $93,000 plus or minus. We're not going to get 2,080 hours out of that person. Best case scenario, once we figure in vacation time, sick leave, training, mandatory training, we don't have that hours of coverage. With the overtime money, we get a full 2,080 hours of coverage. We can use it when we need it. We can say we have a storm tonight. We had the Snowtober storm that you folks talked about last week. Without having proper overtime, we can't cover that adequately. We can't add personnel. So I don't know if that answers the question, John.
So, Jerry, does that also cover all sick time that is unplanned?
Covers sick time that's unplanned, covers vacation time.
In the event of an emergency, it covers the emergency that's unplanned?
It does.
It covers presidential elections, it covers a candidate coming into town. that we're
VIP
not- that
details,
we're-
presidential elections.
So when the president comes here and comes down to the local farm and meets, we don't get reimbursed for that, do we?
We do not.
Okay, so there's a number of factors going into overtime that are, all right, for example, Jerry, you're pretty good at numbers. If we were to eliminate all overtime, how many more people would we need?
Oh, God.
Ballpark it. Is it one and a half person?
We would need, I'm going to say at least 8 to 10 personnel.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So did someone second my motion?
Yeah, Chris had a question.
Dave, when we first discussed this, didn't you express to us too that to get any of these positions, you had to fund that overtime? Not funding it is not an option. You have to fund that overtime, don't you, to hire these new positions?
Well, no. If you want to get to 11 personnel, you first need to fund the overtime so you can have 10. If you don't fund the overtime, then essentially you may have some shifts are covered by 11, some by 10, some by 9, because you won't be filling that backfilling. And just on the shifts, I mean, Rich is right, this is a very competitive environment, but, and one reason we strive to stay away from this flexible scheduling is that we hire somebody, we train them, they get experience, as soon as they find an opening in a different department that has a stationary schedule, we've lost all that training money, it's gone. They just leave, and our turnover in apartments is not very high, so that's a significant risk we see, is training somebody and they leave to work for somebody else.
John?
I've seen training agreements that police and fire departments have that if an officer leaves within a certain period of time, 2 or 3 years, they have to reimburse the training costs. Is that an option?
Yeah, it's an option, I don't know how enforceable it is. Bill, you want to speak to that?
I've actually litigated up in Manchester, and it
Yeah.
was found to be enforceable.
Against Bill?
It was the only case I lost. Hey, before I address that question, I want to say, isn't it great to have a police department where the captain can come up and respond so knowledgeably? I'm so proud of each and every one of the people who work in our police department, because they're all highly professional and able to respond like that. Now, that was pretty good. What was the question, John?
Never misses an opportunity.
There you go. The issue is that, yes, many police departments, typically smaller police departments, have those agreements, those training agreements in place, so that they can protect the capital expenditure that the town manager spoke of. That expenditure is significant. We figure it takes about 18 months to get somebody out on the road from the testing date through the training process, which for us lasts about a year. So 18 months after the conditional offer is made, that person's hired. And then it takes about another 3.5 years, really, for a total of about 5 years where you totally feel like a person's completely ready to handle kind of anything that would come to play in a municipality like ours. That's a lot of money, especially that first 18 months when you're spending not just the salary for the officer who you have hired, but for at least 12 weeks of that, and sometimes more, you're spending money for the field training officer that is essentially that person's full-time training officer, responds to every call, makes sure that they know the town of Londonderry and how we police in the town of Londonderry. So the idea is a good one. It does help you to protect your asset. They are enforceable. That said, it costs money to enforce and to defend those agreements. And what we like to do as an approach is when we commit, we ask for the same commitment back. And so it's a gentleman's agreement that, look, we're going to invest a lot of time in you. This is a good place to work. It's recognized, the Londonderry Police Department is recognized throughout the state as one of the most professional agencies, a good place to work, where you're going to be trained, where you can have a long-term career in a community that is extremely supportive of the police department. So for us, because of a lot of the intangibles, we're able to save on the tangible, which is the dollar. I hope that answers the question.
It does.
Thanks. Anything else?
Okay, so bringing it back to the council. All right, so Tom has a motion.
Just make one quick comment.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to also let the public know officially that when you look at the detail of the fire department's budget, that line item, and this might have been what one of the, I think Brian was talking about, was that, although we see this here as a separate line item. It's not duplicated in the actual budget itself. You could see last year's at $134,000, and this year, being at $55,000 for the town manager budget. So that 76,000 is taken out of the general budget and put here on this article. So just wanted to clarify that as well.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Margot, I had a question. On that, on the motion, or on Tom's motion, was there a second?
Yes.
Okay. John did, okay. All right. So, and we've already gone through, the Budget Committee said they reconsider. All right, so I'll just bring it to a vote. All right, so that's where we're at. The motion would be to reduce it by 163,000 and some change, and then the positions would start being funded on January 1st, 2013. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So, if I may interject, what was the exact amount? So if we do decide to take a motion to rescind?
240115.
But the 76,565 is still in there.
No, that's
No,
included in the 240.
That's included
Including
in
in
the
the-
241. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that would be a tax rate impact of 7 cents
Total,
total.
5 cent savings.
Okay. All right, so motion and a second. All those in favor of Tom's motion on Article 9 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, chair votes affirmative, motion passes 5-0. Article 9 as amended. Okay. All right, next on deck, we have a citizen's petition for land use change tax of the Conservation Fund and General Fund. And I believe that gentleman is here.
So we should, Mr. Chairman, we ought to move to Article 12 at this point,
All right,
and not address the petition articles.
so we don't,
Unless,
Well-
because we can't.
we're not taking a position on 10? Yeah, well, it's right here. It does say we did.
can.
Yeah. All right. What was the Budget Committee's input on that? Did you guys take a position on it?
Yes, the Budget Committee did take a position on Article 10 to support Article 10 with a vote of 6-1.
6-1?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion with the council?
Well, I can motion for the town council to take to support Article 10.
Okay, we got a motion?
Second.
Well, I'm just getting this out on the table. Yeah. All right, so motion and a second for discussion. Okay.
Before you vote, you want to...
Yeah, I'm going out to the public. Yep,
Whatever you like.
yep. 6-1. The Budget Committee was 6-1. Okay. Members of the public, would you like to speak to Article 10? It's my article, and I'll bring it up.
Jay
if I
Hooley,
want to.
25 Yellowstone Drive. I'm obviously asking that the council support this article, and I think there are several articles that you've already addressed that speak to why that ought to happen. Article 3, as Dave said, we've been underfunding that for a number of years, hoping to recover monetarily, economically, and get our funding up to where it ought to be. I think we're in year 5 of our recovery plan, and we keep moving it out. Article 5, the capital reserve, something we've been underfunding, hoping to catch up, I believe. Is that an accurate statement? And Article 9, we just reduced when we're going to hire firefighters in order to minimize the financial impact on the town. What Article 10 would accomplish is bringing up some money that could be used for other purposes that, since I believe 1996 town meeting, could be used only expressly for one single purpose, which is conservation. This article does not address any monies in the conservation fund. Those would remain, and I believe that's approximately 1 million? 1.1 million, and that would remain. This does not reallocate any of that. This simply addresses future funding through the land use change tax. It doesn't gut future funding. The first 100,000 will always still go to conservation, and what we're looking at is any monies above and beyond that, that some of it start to come back to the general operating budget for relief in other areas where we need it, and for that reason, I hope the council will support this article.
Thanks, Jay.
All right, thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Could I
For
ask-
Jay or the town manager?
For the town manager.
Okay.
Dave, when the land was set aside for Moose Hill and the historical properties that's on Pillsbury, what was the source of funding for acquiring that land?
I had to search that for you, I do not know.
Oh, I thought it
town
was
meeting,
the
wasn't it?
conservation.
It might have been, but I
Funding.
don't know.
I believe it was, I think it was voted on at town meeting.
May have been unfunded balance.
You think, it-
I don't know exactly where the source
so you
came
don't think
from,
it
but I
was the
believe that-
conservation fund money?
Well, I don't know, well, apparently somebody knows.
Okay. Great. A grant from the state, Betsy?
Yeah, Appleway, do you remember Appleway?
I do.
Scenic and Cultural Byways Grant.
Ah, yes, and those have gone bye-bye. So I would just encourage people, as you're looking at this proposal, to understand that recently Londonderry lost the ability to set aside one parcel of land because we didn't have sufficient funding to move forward. The assessed value of the property was somewhat less than it was ultimately sold to a private interest. And I would just encourage you, as you drive through the center of town, to look what fields are available and what apple orchards are available, and ask yourself if you'd like to see a mini mall or another subdivision there, because when we lose these properties, we have one opportunity to capture them. We have a window right now for the next few years. I believe the only funds we can realistically expect to have at this time to acquire those properties is the conservation land. So I would just caution you to think about some of those resources that Londonderry has that many communities do not have, and whether or not we want to be putting some of that aside for the future. So thank you.
May I ask the town manager a clarifying question?
Of course you can.
Dave, if this passes and the funds are moved to the general fund versus being in the conservation fund, can this town council decide to buy open space with it?
Yes, you can. Just one point of clarification is that this legislation does not impact the current fund balance in the Conservation Fund. That by law can only be expended upon direction of the Conservation Commission. So we're talking about all new funds going forward would be, if this passed, would be allocated some to the Conservation Fund under the control of the Conservation Commission, and then to the general fund, which have to be appropriated at a town meeting. But yes, the council can take the initiative, should it choose, to purchase conservation land.
So the conservation committee could come here with a recommendation to buy a piece of land, and if the town council approves it, they can use the money from that general operating fund to buy that land,
If it's been appropriated by a town meeting.
if it's been appropriated by town meeting,
That's
which it
correct.
would still, which is the same way that we did it before.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
you.
So it's still there.
Thank you.
Dave, practical example. Let's say that the town receives $200,000 due to land use change taxes. What's the disposition of the $200,000 under this article?
It goes into the general fund. I do not anticipate budgeting any dollars as estimated revenue because it's so volatile from year to year. And so at the end of the fiscal year, the council would have an additional $200,000 in undesignated fund balance to either keep in the fund balance or appropriate for any purpose or recommend appropriation of those funds for any purpose which is legal, and that's going to be approved by town meeting.
So in that case, zero of the $200,000 goes in the conservation fund. It all goes into the general fund?
Well, I'm sorry, I was giving you an example. Under this example, if somebody had $200,000,
Right,
the first 100 goes to the conservation fund,
right?
and then the next 100, 40,000 goes in the conservation fund, 60 to general fund, so it's 140 and
That's why I
60.
just wanted to go through that practical example.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
And Dave, the average has been about 200,000, it's come in over the years?
Well, the average over the last 10 years has been 188,000. The median year has been 132. And the reason I bring that up is because over the last 10 years, it has ranged from 0 in FY03 to 699,000 in FY07. So it really varies depending upon development opportunities and activities in the town.
Just a point of clarification, we didn't lose any piece of land to the private developer. It was appraised incorrectly and by the Conservation Commission's appraiser. And when the actual appraisal came in, it was much lower than he wanted to sell for, and then he sold to a developer.
You're up. Public comment?
Yes?
Paul DeMarco, 30 Holstein. Before I make my comment on this, just a quick comment. You voted on Councilor Dolan's amendment to Article 9, but then you never voted to see what the council would vote to support or not support that on the warrant, if I was following you correctly.
Support the amendment or support?
Well, you voted on the amendment to reduce the,
Well, I said Article 9 as amended.
okay.
So is that correct, Dave? Did we
I
do
think
it?
you guys missed a step.
Did we miss it? Or no?
I just want to make sure you guys are covered, that's all. Watching out for you.
Are we covered or not?
I've seen bodies do it different ways. Sometimes they vote on the amendment, then they vote on the main motion as amended.
Right.
That's
So
a
we
typical way to
voted
do
on it as amended.
Right.
So I think we're
A lot of bodies vote again on the main motion as amended. It's really, it's a duplicate step for a body of 5, but it's, a lot of bodies follow that.
So that'll go 5-0 for the town council.
Correct.
Okay. So with Article 10, definitely I support this. I'm a big user of our conservation land. In fact, gentleman who preceded me up here, him and I often hike together in the Musquash with some other friends. But as much as I'd like to see us grow the Musquash and continue to grow it, I think we could still do that while routing some of that money back into the general fund for maybe projects that'll be much more important to the community in the future. So, as Dave alluded to, if a certain amount of that money, it would end up in the undesignated fund balance, and then that could be available to a future legislative body to designate for some other purpose that maybe is more important to the community at that time than obtaining more conservation land, while still giving the Conservation Commission money for things like stewardship and acquiring additional land. So I do support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was clarifying the intent of the article and also the math with the petitioner, Mr. Hooley, and he kind of set me straight. So it's my understanding as a taxpayer that this appears to kind of be a what I would term an excellent compromise given the economic situation we're in, and that the Conservation Commission, which has received a lot of good support over the years and has the benefit of now having a decent amount of funds in there, 1.1 million, that they get to keep to pursue the Open Space Task Force plan. But this particular article gives us some, gives the taxpayer some annuitous revenue while at the same time continuing to fund the Conservation Commission. So I see this as a win-win-win in that there's a decent fund in there now, depending upon your perspective, but it's a decent amount. There's an ongoing revenue stream that'll continue into the Conservation Commission, and there's an ongoing revenue stream that'll go into the general fund balance for the purposes of the tax base. Based on the annual averages that Dave gave, I think this is the kind of thing we should look to do now and going forward. And I have been an open supporter of open space previously to the tune of millions of dollars of bonds, which I know some folks on the council didn't agree with then. So I wanted to make sure I got up and say that I think this is the type of thing, this is the type of policy change that I think we do need to do, and even supporters of open space like myself need to be amenable to this type of change, and I am. So I support this.
Thanks, Mike. John?
I apologize. Paul, when he came up, he triggered a question I forgot to ask on number 9.
Mm-hmm.
When you send that back for us to reassess based on the amendment, will we be provided the tax implications for 14 and 15 as we are in other articles? Or I recognize it's limited time. Is there time to at least give us, because Chris brought up a good point about the escalating costs. We're talking about 7 cents and 13, but I'm wondering what it is in 14 and 15 when we deliberate.
Sure, we'll have those for you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, John. Brian?
Brian Farmer, 106 Chase Road. Seems like we've got a parade of former counselors and budget committee members and coming up here telling you what they think. I think
Somebody unlocked the door.
Yeah. I'm probably in trouble for being here in the first place, but anyway. I think that this is a very important change to make here at this time. I think, we're looking at revenue, right? We're looking at revenue sources. we've taken a couple of measures to fence revenue into specific buckets with some of these earlier articles. I think those are excellent approaches. I also think that this one becomes that same sort of excellent approach. Land use change taxes will continue to roll to the Conservation Commission until there's actually a large purchase, a large, substantial type of purchase, or several purchases that create that type of volume. And when it gets to that type of volume, the taxpayers in the general fund are going to see some benefit. So I do support this. I think the voters should be supporting it. I encourage the council, and if the Budget Committee has not voted on this yet, I would encourage you to vote to support this unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Todd?
Just to clarify on Article 10, we did vote, just to reiterate.
6 to 1.
The
6
vote-
to 1, yep.
The vote was 6 to 1, and a lot of the reasons that were already discussed were the primary reasons for it.
Great, okay, thank you. Okay, back to the council.
We have a motion and a second on the floor.
Motion and a second. All right, all those in favor of Article 10 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0, chair votes affirmative. Okay. Article 11, establish a special revenue fund for cable department. That is by petition. So Dave, we got a petition in front of us. Can you explain a little bit of what this is?
If passed by the voters, this would establish a special revenue fund for the cable department in that revenues from the cable provider would be placed in a separate fund to pay for expenditures for the cable department and PEG access purposes. This can be amended at deliberative session. It cannot be amended this evening.
So Dave,
I have a question.
Hold on a second, John.
so Dave, in the gray underneath, says if passed, this article will prevent the town from utilizing $105,000 in franchise fee revenues, et cetera, okay? There is no revenue fund now.
Currently, there is not. That's correct.
So the $105,000, if we want to use it, it's going to come out of the general operating fund.
Well, currently, in the operating budget, you have, and I don't know the numbers exactly in front of you, you have $270,000 on the expense side for the cable division, and you have $388 on the revenue side. So the net is about $105,000.
But if we need the $105,000, let's say this passes and we need the $105,000, we can take it from the general operating fund from the money that was put in there that was the excess of the cable.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
How does this differ from Article 16? And does this really kind of get rid of Article 16?
What Article 16 was, it was included in a recognition that there was no longer a cable special revenue fund, so all those dollars went to the general fund, and it was in recognition that the cable division would need some equipment upgrades in the near and midterm, so the recommendation was to fence a portion of that fund balance to establish a capital reserve fund for cable equipment with the council agents to expend.
So I guess if I was the person that was in charge of the cable fund, I mean, wouldn't this Article 16 be better than Article 11? I mean, I'm just thinking 200 is better than 100, so I'm just, I'm just kind of trying to,
Well, actually, if this passes as is, then you can reasonably anticipate there'll be about $388,000 into the cable special revenue fund every year. That's been the historic level of revenues coming in from franchise fees and the equipment grant from Comcast.
so it's to get the other 100.
So essentially, what
16's not
so-
providing.
Article 16 is recommended as a one-time
Okay.
infusion into that capital reserve fund, whereby Article 11, if passed, would be an annual infusion into
Okay,
that
I get
special
you.
revenue
All
fund.
right. Just wanna make sure I understood first.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
As I brought up to you this morning, I have a concern about the description in the gray part of the warrant, because the way this is written, I mean, right now, the franchise funds come into the general fund. And because we found out that there was no established cable fund, all the cable expenses are in the general fund.
For FY12, FY13, that's correct.
For FY13.
That's correct.
As this is written, if the cable franchise fees are now segregated off and put in a special revenue fund, the town's operating budget is going to remain having the expenditures on its side.
That's correct.
So in effect,
this is going to cost the town, whatever the, well, you said the expenditures are 265?
380.
Well, it's 380 in lost revenue.
The revenue is 380, the expenses are,
So 265, so it's, what is it, 9 cents in taxes?
So it'd be a 9-cent tax
Tax
increase.
effect.
it's 265 is the amount of money.
So 6, maybe
Allocated for the
7 or
cable
8
division.
cents?
Right.
So isn't it incumbent upon us to put that on there?
It
As
depen-
warning the taxpayers? I mean, they wrote it, and I don't think we can change it, so I think it's necessary to point that out.
Here's the way the transition year I envision working, is you're absolutely right, is that the expense for the cable division is in the operating budget. If this passes by law, the council has to establish the date by which this revenue fund takes effect. And since the operating fund is paying for the cable expenses in FY13, I would suggest that you make this effective, if it's passed by the citizens, on June 30th, 2013. At that point, when we develop the FY14 budget, we can craft an article to put similar to what we have for article for the outside details, which is Article number 7, is to fund the special revenue account for cable services and have the expenditure in that special revenue fund to follow the directives of the voters this year if they do approve this article.
Right, but that takes care of the problem, but that doesn't change the fact that passage of this now results in a 8 or 9 cent tax
It
increase.
doesn't.
Well, actually, it does. Okay.
No, it doesn't, I'm sorry.
Excuse
Well-
me, right now
Well-
the council's up here.
But it does.
Thank you.
Okay, because what you're doing is you're taking the revenue out of and the general fund has the expenses, and you can shake your head all you want, but that's what it is. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
But didn't you say,
Just for explanation,
Yeah.
if Tom is correct, if this special revenue fund was effective July 1st, if the council said this will be effective July 1st.
2012.
2012,
Right.
then you'd have money coming in from the franchise fees, put in a special, separate fund, which is a special revenue fund, but you couldn't use those to pay the cable expenses for FY13 because they're in the operating budget. So it all depends upon the effective date of when the council
We
determines.
can make this effect, maybe we can do it the 30th of June, 2013, right?
That would be my recommendation.
But the way,
No tax effect,
but the way it's written, it says, no expenditures will be made except by a vote of the legislative body to appropriate a specific amount from said fund for a specific purpose related to the fund, of the fund, or source of revenue. No expenditures were proposed in the warrant.
I guess
So
what Da-
you put the expenditures in the general fund.
No, you did.
No, yeah, because they have to be, because there wasn't a
There was
fund
no fund.
established.
There was
okay?
no fund.
There was no
But the
fund. That's what-
voters voted for 10
No,
years
they
on
didn't.
that.
Well,
No,
they may
they
have,
didn't.
but the point is, you didn't establish the fund. Okay, so
No,
that's
you
what you.
didn't.
Okay,
Town didn't.
fine.
Okay,
So, hold on, hold on. Can I finish it?
Yes, people-
Yes, finish it. Now, I understand it wasn't done correctly, okay? That doesn't change the fact that it wasn't done correctly. So now you're trying to fix it. That's fine. You want to establish a separate revenue fund. But what you did in your article, you didn't expend anything. So now, just let me finish, please. I'm not interrupting you. Please don't interrupt me. What you're doing is this. You're taking the money as it comes in, and you're setting it aside in a special revenue fund. But you didn't take any expenditures out of that. So when $388,000 comes in from Comcast, it's going to sit in a bank account in a special fund. None of that money is going to be used, not 1 cent of it, to pay any of the cable expenses. You can say, we put it in the operating budget, but we had to because the fund wasn't established. That means it's a 8 or 9 cent increase in your tax rate. All right, now, unless it's delayed for a year, that's what your warrant article does. And the fact is, you, by the language you wrote, specifically limiting any expenditures out of that special revenue fund to what the voters passed by number. You wrote it, that's what you wrote. Unless you do that, which you didn't do, you can't take any money out of the special revenue fund for FY13. It comes out of the general fund. Since you took the revenue away, it's got to be made up somewhere, and that's on the tax rate. So you added 8 or 9 cents with passage of this thing. All I'm saying is, it's incumbent upon us to tell the taxpayers and the voters what the truth is.
Excuse me. Is it my turn now?
Go ahead.
I have become extremely friendly with DRA. And DRA approved this article.
Not saying it's wrong.
And, no, I explained the whole situation to them. And this is the way that they told me it should go. First of all, you're assuming that this, I'm going to go to the 105, you're assuming that the town council will, or the town manager, will want to take 105,000 from that fund.
No. I'm not talking about
Just
that.
because you've done it over the past 4 years.
I'm not even talking
Not
about that issue.
understanding it. That is
I'm
not
talking-
the issue. I understand.
No, you don't.
No, wait.
I do. Can you
No, you
please,
don't.
Okay, go ahead, please, go ahead.
please let me speak?
Mhm.
Thank you. I do understand. I know that on July 1st, 2012, all the franchise fees are going into this special revenue fund. But you still have a budgeted item for the cable department in your budget. So I'm not taking any money from that. That's in your budget. And you weren't going to take it from the special illegal revenue fund either.
Can I take it?
So,
Hold on a second.
Can I?
Go ahead.
It's okay if I?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. What he's trying to say is that a citizen came in here and questioned the process. In 1984, town meeting took a vote to put the money in a fund. What we discovered, because a citizen questioned the process, is our town attorney informed us that that was illegal because we weren't allowed to do that till 1989. So all the money that was sitting in the fund, by law, was transferred to the general fund. We didn't say we're gonna close down the cable group. We said, okay, all the money's there, so all we have to pay for the cable department from where, the same place where the revenue is. That's where it is today. Okay? Now, going forward, what we were saying in Article 16 is okay, we have to figure out how to fix this. So we're gonna put $200,000 back in and ask the voters to approve that, so we can reestablish that fund. What Mr. Frieda is saying is that until we get this mess straightened out legally, the money will just sit if this passes.
until next town meeting.
Well, we voted the ballot now, so this will sit, and $388,000 will sit over there, but the $265,000, because we can't touch that money if it passes, has to come from someplace. So we have to raise taxes to pay for that. It's just the way it works. Now, did you have our town attorney look at this?
Yes,
The town attorney looked at it? So what
Yes.
he probably said is that the language is right, but what he's not looking at was probably the implication of the budget. So what happens is we can't reach into a pocket that's locked and take the money out and pay. So we have to raise taxes to put that money in our checking account, because now it's in a special revenue savings account. We can't touch it. And we have to pay for it out of our checking account. That's all he's saying. But that is what happens. That's just the practicality.
What you did is
No.
legal. It's just that you haven't,
No.
you
I
segregated revenue.
understand what you are saying, and I'm saying you are wrong.
Okay.
Please listen to me.
Okay.
That money, July 1st, 2012, is going in there. And when it comes around to
If it
2013, if it passes, when it comes around to 2013, to the budget again, and deliberative session and voting in March of 2013, if that gets passed, again, you will have the money to use for salaries, equipment, and anything else the cable department needs.
You're absolutely right, but that won't.
It's not the way it's gonna work. It's not coming out of that fund.
2014.
But we have to, for
No,
1 year,
it
we have
will-
to go and get the money to pay them. We don't have it.
The voters
No,
haven't.
it will become available July,
Let me
June,
explain it to you from a...
July
Let me explain
1st,
it to you.
2013.
Hold on.
No, this
Hold
was
on.
explained to me by DRA.
Listen, DRA is not here explaining it, so it's third party to us, okay?
Sean, she's right.
They're the law.
She's right. It won't
They're
become
not the
available
law.
to July 1st, 2013, which is the first day of fiscal year 2014.
Right.
So the budget that we're dealing with now is the fiscal year 2013 budget, not the 14 budget. So the money that goes into that special revenue savings account will be, you're right, will become available for fiscal year 2014. So in the meantime, for fiscal year 2013, we have a revenue, we have a hole that we have to fill from the general fund because we're not allowed, the way this article is written, we're not allowed to utilize this money in fiscal year 2013, which ends June 30th of 2013. Correct.
Right.
That,
That's all we're saying. We have a hole for 1 year because we'll lose that revenue and we have to fund it from somewhere. Or we have to
year
close
is-
the cable studio down.
your year is 2012 to 2013, and you have that money in the budget.
Right, in the general fund budget, operating budget.
But you haven't authorized
Exactly.
expending it, and your article says the voters have to authorize the expenditure. You've segregated the revenue, fine, that's correct.
But it doesn't happen till July 1st, 2012. And in 2012 to 2013, you already have money to run the cable station
In the general fund.
in the general fund.
Right.
Right.
So you don't need any of that money until till July 1st of 2013. And by that time, we will have voted on expending this again. And that money that was in there will be able to be used for that purpose of running the department.
You're mixing the 2 years together.
Okay, can I just ask a question, please? Dave, how much is left from the cable fund from this year that you moved over to the general fund for this fiscal year?
The fund balance is about 535,000.
Okay, so the fund balance is about 535,000, and that went into the general fund.
That's correct.
So I think what, I don't know you, he is saying is that you have 535,000 that you put in from the cable revenue, whether it was legally established or not. You move that into the general fund, and those are the funds that you could be using for the fiscal year 2013 to 12 to 13.
Actually, it wasn't moved, it was
Well, whatever,
always there.
Tom, you know what, it's a shell game here.
Well,
It
it's
was
not a shell
created.
game,
It was
Mary.
created for a bookkeeping reason. Dave said that at the last meeting I was at. It was created for a bookkeeping.
auditors and not by the
auditors,
voters.
that's right. But whatever reason it was created, it was a fund that on paper was created to self-fund the cable department, and it has successfully done that. I understand why you guys want to move some of the money to the general fund. Stop.
No,
I
but
know
it's
it's
not, Mary, it's not. Well, I'm not talking about moving the money or not. I'm talking about what the effect is of this warrant article.
Okay, and
not
I'm
saying
trying
it's
to point-
good or bad. It's perfectly legal, but there's two parts to it, which you just apparently
I
aren't
am getting
understanding.
from you.
You haven't expended anything out of it. You're
I
putting the money in
understand
the
what you're
account and you're
saying.
leaving it there.
And so I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, that it hasn't, it doesn't say, though, that the legislative body has to expend it, or does
Yeah,
it say the
says
voters?
the legislative body
And you
by
guys are the
specific
legislative
No, we're
body.
not.
No,
The
we're not.
during
voters
this-
are.
This is the
during
voters.
The
During
voters
the in-between times.
No, we're the governing body.
No.
They're the people of the
All
legislative
right.
body.
Well, Dave, the question was, how much money was moved, from one column to the other, so that it was accurately portrayed as general fund money as opposed to cable fund money, and that was $500,000. Now, you've included that in this budget, and you've said, if we were to pass the budget the way the budget is written right now, and this passed, then there would be $388,000 or $1,000,000 that would not be available to you next year as part of that budget. And what Cindy is saying is that already in our minds as a town, as a town's people who use that cable studio, already we had a process by which that cable studio was self-funded, and that was through the cable fees. And through the past few years, you've been able to take, I understand it's not legal, that it was
I'm not
never
saying
legal.
it's
I'm
legal
saying
at
that you
all.
were able to move from one column to the other to give the impression that the
Excuse me. Hold on, Mary. There's a discussion going on. Please be respectful of that, okay? Thank you. If you want to have a talk, please do it outside and then come back in.
Okay.
Okay? That's the rules, Mary.
Whether it was properly established or not, it was practice that there was this cable fund. And that is the way we have operated for the past however many years we've operated that way. For you all to discover something about it and make that change is, whatever it is. But right now, I understand what you're saying, that this is going to make a difference next fiscal year. But for the future fiscal years, it will not.
No, it won't, you're right.
Okay. So
Provided you guys spend the money in the future article.
provided we do, but the whole point of having the cable fund and having it all these past years was so that that division
But-
would be
but-
self-funded.
But what you're failing to understand is, I'm not saying this is, I support this or against it, this is good or bad, it's legal, it's not. Well, number one, it's legal. Number two, all I'm saying is, in the gray part of the warrant that explains it, the way it's written, in my opinion, is that it results in a tax increase of 9 cents.
I understand what you're saying, Tom.
Okay. You want to
Now-
offset it by what you believe was the
No,
cable.
I
Wait, let me
appreciate what
finish.
you're
If you want
saying.
to offset it by what you think was the cable fund's undesignated fund balance and now got sent into the general fund balance, fine, do that. But it's not done, and it isn't done by the voters. And as the voters look at this thing, they should understand, I vote for this thing, taxes go up 9 cents unless something else happens after the election.
Or can it happen at the deliberative session, is my question.
It can-
It's not possible to do anything with the undesignated fund balance at the deliberative session.
Oh, yeah, you can do that, but the application, first of all, to use undesignated fund balance at a deliberative session or town meeting, you need an appropriation. This does have an appropriation. And this article is absolutely correct. It's right in the statute, the way it's written. And that's why, under 3195D, the legislature contemplated these issues and developed and authorized the selectmen, which is our town council, to establish the effective date, because they knew this was gonna happen.
Right.
So to make sure that this transition, the taxpayers are held harmless, if this is passed, my suggestion is that the council make the effective date for putting the cable funds into the special revenue fund on June 30th, 2013.
I know, but that doesn't accomplish what Cindy's trying to do. What Cindy's trying to do is keep the cable company, the cable department self-funded from this year on, and in that fund.
FY14 it does, but not 13, that's correct.
Right,
Mr.
but I
Chairman-
think she wanted it to start at my 13, but, so can I just ask one more question? There's no place in the deliberative session where we can ask for this money to be appropriated from the undesignated fund balance to cover the salaries at the cable studio for the coming year.
The only way you can do that is to have the town meeting use undesignated fund balance for the operating budget for FY13.
For that portion of the operating, but, well, it's the bottom line, so it doesn't matter, but appropriate that amount of money.
Right.
Okay, but that is possible at the deliberative session.
That is possible, deliberative session, that's correct.
Okay.
We're already funding it through the general fund.
Well,
You
she's
are,
saying-
but not through the,
saying fund balance.
I'm saying
From
do
the
it, do it from the
Take the
surplus,
tax
which you've
impact.
already, which you took the you moved, bookkeeping.
Which reduces the operating budget tax effect, but
Right.
it still doesn't change that this is a 9 cent increase.
Yes, it
It might be a
does.
9 cent, no.
It does.
Overall, it may be 0, but but 9 cents goes down on operating if you do what you're suggesting.
No.
This is still 9 cents. Okay.
Let me take
Please
a shot
listen.
at this.
No,
This is
because
really
the-
an
Hold on,
Me
hold
speak.
on.
One more second,
Hold
though,
on.
Tom, one more second. 9 cents doesn't go down because you're funding all of the salaries in the future year out of this balance.
No, you're not, because
You-
you're taking,
In the
you're
general
funding it
fund,
out of
which you're doing
operating
this year.
budget, you're
It's
using
no
UFB to
different.
pay it.
Listen, let me take a shot at this. This is really an accounting issue. It's not a policy issue at this point. What we're talking about is an accounting issue. And the issue is that without this article, let's say this didn't exist, what would happen on July 1st is the cable studio would enter the new year, new fiscal year, and it would have an operating budget of whatever it is, and the town would be in receipt of cable revenues that would offset those costs. And now, the way this is written, the town is still going to have, on July 1st, the cable department expenses of 200 and some odd thousand, but the offsetting revenues are now frozen in a savings account that for next year can't be used to offset those expenses.
The only money-
So the net impact is an increase. Was going to net out to zero. You had offsetting revenues to expenses. The revenues go away for a year, so all you have is the expenses. So the impact to the so there is an impact to the tax rate, because we take away the offsetting revenues that would bring the expenses down to zero in net.
Except, Tom, that you had an abundance of revenues that would have offset those expenses in previous years. And you've been, through accounting, have moved those over to the fund, to the operating budget and to the undesignated fund.
But those,
balance.
we can't access those.
But as
Excuse-
a legislative body, can we? I'm sorry.
Please let me. The only money that you have taken from the revenue, from the special revenue fund that is now illegal, or has been found illegal, was the $105,000. The rest of that has been appropriated in the budget.
Right.
The 270, 60, whatever that number is, has been appropriated in the budget.
Right.
And you, as a council, took $105,000 of that special revenue fund and used it for the general fund.
But who's going to
Now-
pay for that 270,000 in the operating budget?
The same people that have been doing it for the
No,
past
that's
year.
the issue you're missing. That money that came to pay for that won't be available next year. It's going to be frozen for a year.
We don't have that income anymore. That income is gone
That's-
after this.
Because of the way
this
the
gets
article's
Dave,
written, it goes away for
I
a
have a
year.
question for
For
you.
1 year.
What has been happening to the $200,000 that, in the fund, about $300,000 comes in from franchise fees? And you've been taking 105 of that. That's 1.5 of that franchise fee.
5%.
Where has that $200,000 gone?
Up until we were notified, or we discovered that it was illegal, when you get a check of X number of dollars, which represents 5% of the franchise fee, we'd put 3.5% into the cable fund and 1.5% into the general fund. And that 1.5% represents about $105,000.
Exactly. So the other 200,000 odd dollars is still in that special revenue fund.
It's now classified as a general fund because the special road fund was never legally established.
Right, but I'm talking about the practice of what we've been doing. All right. So we, as a town, have not been touching that other $200,000, only the 1.5%, the 105, for the past 4 years.
No, the town has been using that 3.5 to fund cable operations.
And that's why I was saying it's a third party.
Well, then I'm confused, because you just told me that the 105 was going into the general fund,
Right.
and the 200 odd dollars were staying in the special revenue.
From which cable expenses are paid, or were paid.
But a cable budget is in the general budget fund
Previous to this year,
and
it
is
was not.
appropriated.
Previous to this year, it was in a special revenue fund. The 3.5 goes into this pot of money, and from
Yes.
that pot of money, we've been paying cable operating expenses.
But you appropriated $265,000 for the cable department.
For next year, that's correct,
And you did the same thing last year
right?
and the year before that.
We had a source of revenue in previous years. We won't have a source of revenue next year.
But you had
But you-
more than
you do, you
260,000 in
appropriate
that,
it
in
every
that
year.
fund
Not available to us.
this year.
It's not our money.
Not the money that's coming starting July 1st, 2012.
How about old money?
I'm talking about the old money that was already
It's
in
not
there.
available to us.
It's in the UFB?
It's in the general fund.
We can't touch
No,
it.
it's not in the general
It's
fund, it's in the undesignated fund balance.
Okay,
And it's
so
fenced
that
off
is,
from us.
that is what I'm asking you. Is there a way for us, as a legislative body, at the deliberative session, to make a motion to fund the cable department for that 1 year out of the undesignated fund balance? That includes the $500 that was previously on the line item called the cable fund balance.
Yeah, Dave said you can, and that will then reduce the operating budget by 9 cents.
So it would be better.
Well, except for one thing, it doesn't change the fact that this article is separate and causes an increase by 9 cents.
So you're
Mary,
zeroing out.
If the bottom line is $5.07, and one goes down by 9 cents, and you want to still be at 5.07, the other's got to go up by 9
That's right.
cents.
And
It's
so
simple,
that would-
basic math.
And that would cause a
And that's
zero
all I
increase.
said was, it needs to be reflected accurately for voters, okay?
The accurate way to put in the gray box is that this is a zero impact to the taxpayer. And if you put anything else in, that will be illegal.
Well,
And
then-
that's
then-
according
then-
to DRA.
Well, then that means that if you take the money out of the UFB, you're going to illegally overstate the town operating budget tax effect under your scenario there, because you're saying this one has to be zero.
So
I
then,
mean-
then the compromise would be that unless funds are appropriated from the undesignated fund balance, the impact would be in that gray box, as opposed to saying that if this is passed, it will cost the taxpayers 9 cents.
The money that comes out of the undesignated fund balance will be to offset the operating budget, not this.
Right, but Tom is saying that if this is passed, it will have a net effect of a 9
At
cents.
the total bottom.
The total bottom line will be zero, but in between the articles,
The articles
operating
have to
budget
stand
will
alone.
go down by 9 cents.
The articles have to stand alone.
Okay, well then,
So-
there
so-
has to be a way for that to be
So
explained.
as presented,
Either
yours,
way.
as presented, yours is worded illegally.
It's not worded
No, it isn't.
really. It's just, it's
I'm
just not,
saying
it's just not, it's going to have a different effect than I think
So
what's
I
intended.
take that back, so strike that. So,
All it does is give the special revenue fund 5% instead of 3.5%.
That's exactly correct, but you didn't
And for
spend
the
anything out of
1
it.
year, for 1 year, this whole coming year, 212 to 213, you have appropriated that money in your budget. If you appropriate the money, it has to be there. That's part of your
It's not
bottom
appropriated.
line fund.
Any money in the budget has a tax impact.
Read Article
The
7.
only amount that they've appropriated is
Read Article 7.
$105,000.
It says what it has to do.
The other money they have not appropriated from it.
All right, so ladies, if you go to, we have a special
They will
rep,
have to pay
listen.
Right.
Hold on one second.
Here's what Tom's trying to tell you. In Article 7, we have a police outside detail. The words are used, such appropriation shall be used for the purpose of covering police outside details and shall be funded from users of police outside detail services. That type of language is what he's saying you're missing.
So, and I
Have you
think it's,
have that type of language that says what you want to do with the money,
right,
that would be good.
Right.
You don't have that language, so you can't spend it.
right, and again.
That's all he's saying.
I do have that in my article. It says franchise fees and any other revenues from the cable provider for the purpose of all cable department and PEG access purposes.
But then you say.
So, it will come out of this fund.
No, but then you say this, shall be expended only after a vote by the legislative body to appropriate a specific amount from said fund. You don't have a specific amount.
You
It doesn't
negate it.
say anything about a specific amount.
That's the problem.
That's what it says.
That's the problem.
That means you can take any amount out of it.
That isn't what you said.
goes to
No.
Okay,
the
Mr. Chairman, can I try?
Sure, go ahead.
cable department.
Hold on. I get control here.
Okay.
Lisa.
Yeah. I hear exactly what you're saying, and I understand your intention as it's expressed in the legal language of this article. Article number 7, which they just referenced you, would be a sister article to this one, which would allow expenditure from this account that you're establishing for the purpose of defraying costs of operating the cable system. So the question is there enough time before this warrant is approved to create an article, as Councilor Farrell said, similar to Article 7, authorizing the payment of, I think you said, $200,000 for those expenditures? We're out of time.
Tuesday was the
There's no
deadline.
more runway.
And how many years has a citizen sat up here and done the due diligence and gone to the town's attorney and asked for the specific language and been told they're out of time, that this is inappropriate?
But Mary,
What?
Mary,
No,
you know, you're
seriously,
looking at the
Tom.
wrong thing, because what do you want to put the money in a special revenue fund, all of it, the cable fees. Am I right? That's your intent?
Yes.
Okay, and then you want the cable fund to be funded out of that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Nobody's saying this won't put the revenue in. All we're telling you is you haven't expended the money. You've left it
That's right.
over in another article, okay? Now, the problem, if you're looking at it as, let's go to the deliberative session and amend it and put in expenditures. Maybe you can do that, I don't know. But maybe you don't want to do that, because if this thing goes down and the money comes out of the, we get rid of the expenditures in the operating budget, then the cable division won't be funded. So what you want to do,
Expenditures is in there.
no, you said, your own article said a specific amount. You don't have a specific amount in there.
Such revenues,
Brian, go ahead. Sure.
Brian Farmer, 106 Chase Road. This is a public hearing on this, and this has turned into like a long-running debate. There are other people who'd like to speak on this.
Sure.
I would respectfully request that you allow other people to speak, and then if these two individuals have anything to continue to add, that they be allowed to do so at that time. But this is dragging on.
Okay, that's fine.
could I finish reading?
Sean?
Sure. What?
Such,
Okay, let her finish.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
such revenues and expenditures shall be accounted for in a special revenue fund, to be known as the Cable Special Revenue Fund. Expenditures. You got that?
We got that, but it's
Separate.
not what you think it is. You're not, there's no mechanism driving it. That's what we're trying to tell you. You say it's a word, that's all it is. It's not a
an
number.
amount that
It
people
doesn't
know what to vote on.
You're missing the word appropriation.
Authorize.
It's nowhere in here.
Okay, and
We're
that-
not trying to be mean, and we didn't start this whole cable thing.
That's right.
Okay? Someone else asked the question. We're just trying to explain.
And I will certainly, yield my seat, and I know Dan wants to speak, but,
I will let other people
right.
speak.
But it's
but
frustrating
I'll
that
be back up.
the attorney saw this, knew what her intention was, and didn't tell her she needed to have the word appropriate.
Nobody's saying it's wrong. All I'm saying is, I think it should show 9 cents here. If you want
And
to take it,
DRA would be on your case.
let them be on the case, because
Dave,
I
isn't
think
that
DRA
true?
is wrong, that if that's what they said to you.
They said to me that this is an article that has zero
It's
tax
hearsay.
impact.
It's hearsay. I'm not allowing it. It's hearsay.
The way it's written,
just
you're right.
hearsay. I don't have a written report in front of me that says DRA said this. You're telling me what was based on a phone call or a personal discussion with them.
I have
It means
it on
nothing
my
to me.
computer in writing.
Then you should have brought it.
Yes, I will.
So, anyway, Dan, go ahead.
I just have an odd scenario that's flipping through my head. And it doesn't- Suppose, just to be spiteful, the council decides they don't want to let the funds go until the year 2050. Is that a possibility? And then it just keeps building up in that fund, and the cable company has to close down?
Yes, it could.
Shooting yourself in the foot right there, too.
Wouldn't be a very wise idea,
No,
though.
I was just curious, just the way that was written, I was just...
Pat?
Pasquale Vitale, 75 Mammoth Road. Question I have, for the last 9 years, all the councilmen, all the budget committee people, and the voters of Londonderry voted on a special revenue fund warrant article. Now, after 9 years of voting, we're told that the special revenue fund for the cable was never established. My question is, why did the town present a warrant article in 2002, which is the same warrant article that we have been voting on for the last 9 years?
I'm going to answer that
And I
right now.
think the finance director should have known whether or not there was a reserve fund. If the account was thing, and both Dave Karen was the town manager and Sue Hickey was the finance director when they submitted that warrant article to the town. Now, the voters of this town have listened to the town presenting that warrant article for 9 years. Now that they want revenue, oh, it was never legal. Well, if this goes to court, I think the court system is going to side on the voters of Londonderry.
There was nothing voted on, Pat.
Yes, it was. It was
No,
voted on the
wasn't.
warrant article.
Pat, it wasn't operated. I got the floor. Dave, he's making accusations that every year that we have done this. It is not accurate. Tell me what you guys found going back through all the town meetings and everything else.
I did that. I went back to in fact, I went back to 1974 and 1984.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I?
And the legal term, if I'm correct, why the courts will support the voters is called latches. And if my memory serves me correct, Dave Karen used it on another town, something to do with the town, and I think it had to do with Hull Road.
So, hey, Pat, so you were here, I don't know if you were here or not, about 6 weeks ago. Mr. Belinsky comes in, and he makes a similar argument, and he says, you can't take the 1.5%, made some similar arguments.
Excuse me, I am not talking about the percentage. I am not talking about the
Pat,
percentage.
excuse me.
Don't change the subject.
Pat,
I am saying
excuse
that
me.
the original warrant article that we've been voting on
I'm being
became
polite.
legal the first year we
Pat,
voted on it.
Pat, please, okay? If you just hear me out, okay? So, it started in a conversation around whether or not we could take the 1.5% or whether the whole 5% should go there. And rightly so, Mr. Belinsky brought that up and he said it was illegal. That evening, I looked over at Dave and the council by consensus said, Dave, would you please go to the town attorney? Mr. Belinsky brings up a valid point. Let's finally get an answer.
Did
So,
we see
please, Pat,
anything in writing from the town attorney?
Pat,
No one has seen any writing from the town attorney.
Pat, please. Okay, so Dave comes back and he says at a meeting, he says, okay. He says, in 1984, the town, the legislative body, the town voters, established a cable revenue fund. Okay?
Yeah.
According to the state legislature, we were not allowed to do that until 1989. So when we did it, we did something that was illegal. On the advice of our attorney, what he said to us is that you have to stop the clock, put what's in the cable special revenue fund that everybody thought existed and that they had, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said that fund's illegal. You can't keep money in there. You're not allowed to. Mr. Belinsky was right. We put all that money into the operating fund. All right, let's fast forward. Now, what we're trying to do in Article 16, if we just take this one off the table for a minute, what we're trying to do in Article 16 is we're trying to take the money out of the undesignated fund balance and put it back in. It's nothing that any of us did. Okay, we found out on the advice of council that we weren't doing it right. So we got to fix it.
Then why in 2002 did the town submit a warrant article for the sewer fund, the cable fund, and the police detail as a special revenue fund, which everybody agreed upon? All the councilmen agreed upon, all the budget committee, and everybody at the thing.
Pat.
And the town kept, now, if the town knew it was illegal, If the
Well,
town knew
well,
it was legal,
well,
why did they present the warrant article? That's all I'm asking.
Pat, we
Why
didn't.
was the
Pat,
warrant article presented?
I don't know about you, but I'm a human being and I make mistakes. The town made a
For
mistake.
9 years?
Well, Pat,
You made the mistake for 9 years?
Pat, they made the mistake for 30 years. All right? So now we have to fix it. I mean,
Well, you-
it's,
but you-
it's unfortunate, okay? I understand.
But
We're-
the
we're
problem,
trying to fix
problem
it.
is, I says, if this goes
I
because of
understand.
lashes, you've done something over and over and
Right,
over
Pat.
for 9 years. You set the precedent.
Pat, I can't do anything about yesterday. I can fix it going forward.
There's
Okay?
nothing to fix. There's nothing to fix.
Well, that's what, Pat, I understand. And I certainly understand what you're saying.
But by the way, what was established originally said that the most you could put in that fund was $4,000 a year.
That was back, and that was a separate warrant
That was the
article.
initial.
That was the second warrant
initial-
article.
That was the
If you
one that
look
we
at the
were
wa-
saying
if
that
you-
that established the entire thing.
If
It
you
was-
looked at the warrant
everything
officer.
over 4,000 had to go in the general fund.
If you looked at the warrant article that was associated with the warrant article for the Special Reserve Fund, points back to establishing the fund in 1984, which turned out to
$4,000 a
be
year.
illegal. There was another warrant article about the 4,000, completely separate.
Pat,
You go back and check the records, you'll see that that's the case.
Pat, we understand. We're just trying to fix it going forward. We understand what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Why
It's
you-
just, it's just the
You
way
fixed
they...
it illegally because you already established
All right,
a
well,
patent.
I'm sorry,
And the
Pat.
patent is called latches.
Okay, Pat, I'm sorry.
And I think the court is going to reside on the citizens of Londonderry
well-
who voted for what the town gave us.
Well, then, Pat, then someone's going to have to take it to the court because we're following the best legal advice that we can get, and we're trying to do it correctly.
And why don't, when we get legal advice from our town lawyer, why don't we see it in writing? We have no idea. As a citizens of Londonderry, we have to take everybody's word. Now we have this, now all of a sudden,
So-
after 9 years, we have a mistake.
So here it is. It's here. It's in writing. Okay? Do you want me to read it?
Please.
Okay. Cable Special Revenue Fund. Dear Dave, this letter is intended as a follow-up to our recent telephone conversations and emails regarding the town's CATV Special Revenue Fund. Based upon the information provided to me, it does not appear that the fund was legally established. I understand the town has operated the CATV SRF Special Revenue Fund for in excess of 20 years, and your auditor has recognized it as such. However, the 1983 warrant article, 1984, upon which the town and the auditor apparently rely, do not establish a special revenue fund as provided for in RSA 31:95-C. It seems that the time has arrived that you should be considering addressing this issue by presenting an article to the town meeting so as to formalize the longstanding practices of the community, which is what we're trying to do in Article 16. As always, if you have any questions or wish to discuss these matters further, please do not hesitate to contact me, Barton L. Mayer of Upton, Hatfield.
Okay, if
So
that's the
he's
case-
saying we made a
if
mistake.
that's the case, why was a warrant article produced by the town in 2002? I think the finance director
know.
would know if there's a special account.
Dave,
And especially the
okay,
first
hold
time
on, hold on,
the
hold
warrant
on,
article
hold
is
on.
approved by the DRA.
I want to hear Dave tell me, was there something we did in 2002?
No question we made an error in presuming that the town properly accepted the special revenue funds. We all presume the town did it correctly. When the issue was raised a month ago,
Yes.
research was conducted which showed that it was not properly accepted by the town. So, when you talk about presenting an article in 2002, we just found out, because it's been classified by the auditors as a special revenue fund since the 80s. And so we presume that the selectmen before the council and town meeting properly established the fund, and they didn't. So, what the attorney said is that since it was never established, it is legally part of the general fund, and there are a couple of mechanisms on this year's town meeting warrant to address the issue going forward.
Okay, so bringing it back up, so that's what we have. First off, I have to apologize to you. I've known you a long time. Please no sticker, okay? I've known Pat a long time, and that was out of line. I'm running on not a lot of sleep, and I've been pretty sick, so I
I'm
apologize.
supposed to be at dialysis tonight.
So I apologize. That was very it's not me, and I'm sorry I did that, and I'm sorry for everybody else having listened to it too. So this is what we have. Mea culpa. We're trying to fix it. No fast ones. It wasn't there. We're just trying to fix it going forward.
But you're trying to fix it against the original intent of the warrant article. You are ignoring the original intent of the warrant article that the voters of Londonderry has voted on for the last 9 years. You have set a precedent of the town presenting to the voters a warrant article, which now is termed illegal because of one thing out of it. But the citizens didn't make a mistake. Somebody else made a mistake. Now we have to pay for the mistake.
But no, what's being proposed is there's a citizen's article to restore it to.
You have taken $535,000 out of the special cable reserve fund. That's not fixing it. You need revenue and you're taking it. You guys have gone against the will of the voters of Londonderry.
Well,
Now, if that warrant article was illegal, it shouldn't have been presented for 9 years.
Okay, Pat, in
Well,
fairness,
okay.
let Tom finish his thought.
Okay. We can keep going back and forth on this, okay? That it shouldn't have been done, and therefore we're barred from doing that. The town's attorney has a different opinion. He believes that under state law, you're not authorized to do things unless the voters approve it. So even if it was a mistake, Pat, now, wait, Pat, the voters,
be fair,
the
okay?
voters approved putting revenue in the fund, but they didn't approve creating a special fund. And you can, say latches as many times as you like, Pat, but the fact is, it hasn't been done.
The voters were led
And
to
frankly,
believe,
Pat,
the voters
wait a
were
minute,
led to
Pat.
believe that the
Frankly,
account
Pat,
was
the
there,
voters-
based on the warrant
Pat,
article.
you can keep saying it, but frankly, Pat, the voters got exactly what they thought they got. They got money allocated into a special fund, and it was treated the same way as a special revenue fund, even though it wasn't legally established. So frankly, Pat, when you keep saying latches, you haven't been harmed. Now, so going forward, they've
Removing
taken,
500
Pat, wait a minute,
Pat,
Pat,
stop.
you gotta let somebody else speak here, Pat, or are we just gonna continue to hear this? Okay, so now you've got a situation where the excess has been taken and put in the general revenue fund. The town manager in Article 16 is proposing to take $200,000, put it back into a cable designated fund.
Yeah, and he
Okay?
says for 1 year.
No, Pat, there's $500,000 accumulated, wait a minute, Pat.
He said the $200,000.
No,
The
Pat,
$200,000.
there's $500,000
Pat,
accumulated.
was a 1 year
Stop.
deal.
Pat, stop. There's $500,000 accumulated excess over the years, over the 20 years that everybody thought that there was a special revenue fund. The town manager's proposing to put $200,000 back into it. If you think it's wrong, you can go to deliberative session and change that to $500,000. Your rights are there. If the voters wish to do it, they can do it. As far as the petitioned article, there's a petition to create a special revenue fund. The only thing I said about it was, I think it misstates the tax effect, okay? And I think I'm on fairly solid ground here. The town manager's looked at it, the town's attorney, I believe, has looked at it. Now, if you want to say, I'm going to offset it by taking money out of the UFB to offset the operating budget article, that's fine too. But then that comes down by the same 9 cents as the other one goes up. It's just math, Pat.
I'm not talking about that.
Well, Pat, I'm talking about that because what you're
Because
talking
what I'm asking about,
is
what
you
I'm
keep
asking
saying-
about has nothing to do with
Pat,
what you're talking about.
Well, Pat, it actually does talk exactly about what you're talking about, because all you keep saying is it was done wrong for 9 years and that we should continue to do it wrong going forward. Because you say latches applies, okay, but no judge has approved this illegal act that's happened here.
Then why did the town, again?
Because the town made a mistake, Pat. I think everybody said that enough times. The town made a mistake. The auditors made a mistake. The finance directors,
But we
the
hired a
past
finance
councils made a
director who
mistake.
doesn't know what's going
Frankly,
on
the
with the books.
voters who voted for it, I guess, made a mistake too, Pat.
Yeah. All right, so that's, Pat, we're going to let the next person go, okay? Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any emotional investment in any of this. I think the cable department provides a great service for the town. I know that we've done some things in the past that certain people didn't agree with, but we made decisions in the past based on best available information. Turns out that somewhere in our distant past, a mistake was made, and I see this all as corrective measures. So I understand that, but I have just a couple of questions so that for those of us who are trying to look at this in another context as taxpayers and not necessarily direct users or direct impacted people by the cable fund, I'd like to get some questions to clarify things. It's been said a couple different times that there was an estimated, and I don't know if it was a finite amount, but there was $520,000 in this fund. That's an approximate amount, exact amount?
535.
535. So, Dave, what happened to that 535? When it still exists somewhere.
Yeah, it's reclassified in the town's general undesignated fund balance.
So it is in the undesignated fund
Correct.
balance. Okay, so that moved to undesignated fund balance. And Tom, I get your point about if this article as it is, and if that's what happens in this budget and it's approved, there's going to be a tax bump because the revenues do go away, correct?
It depends the effective date for transferring the revenues.
Okay, so you've offered a compromise or a suggestion, a recommendation to the council regarding an effective date for this.
That's correct.
Of June 30th, which would be the last day of the year of the budget. So the funds that are accumulating now or throughout the year would continue to go to the general fund, and then from June 30th forward, June 30th of 2013, they would begin to go into this account if the voters establish it.
That's correct.
The total value, not this, 3/5, 2/5 thing. not
That's up
this
to the
split.
voters. The voters
Okay.
can have all of it or a percentage of it.
Okay, so I think I get that, and it's a matter of timing. Tom, we call it color money, we call this in our line of work a lot of times, where it comes from and when you can use it. So the revenue would go away, we'd have to pay a tax increase. I heard a comment made a while ago, is there still an opportunity to have another article placed on here to create the appropriation of the money for the expenditure purpose? And I heard the answer was no. January 10th is already passed. That's for citizens petitions?
That's correct.
Is there a date that's passed that the council could not put a companion article on here for an appropriation?
We have to post, I believe, we have to post the warrant for the February 6th deliberative session and in about 2 weeks, which means in order to do that, we'd have to have another public hearing with at least 1 week of posting, approve that, and then get it posted. So there's no...
So you have time, but it's very tightly compressed.
Well, given, we'd have to look at the publication dates, but, it would be, it'd be running up close against our statutory requirement to get it posted at least 7 clear days before the February 6th deliberative session.
So the number that we're talking about here as far as the article, the content of the Article 4, the operating budget, is $265,000 for the cable
132.
department budget?
265, 132, that's
Okay,
correct.
and if Article 11 passes, then there is no offsetting revenue for this amount.
Article 11, there's no offsetting revenue, that's correct. That's the...
It takes
special
away
revenue.
your offsetting revenue for Article 4.
That's
And
correct.
now Article 4 would have your tax impact.
That's correct.
So, okay, so I think I have that.
If the effective date's July 1st of 2012.
Right. Are there amendments that can be made to Article 16 in any fashion, except for the fact that this is covered as a capital reserve fund? There's no amendment to that could cover this operating budget cost, because it would be a capital reserve fund. You can't use capital reserve funds for operating budgets.
That's
So there's
correct.
no amendment there. So
correct.
that's clear.
Right.
Right? I look at this and I say, okay, so the town needs the revenue. We need the revenue to offset the tax rate. That's why we've been doing this for the past several years. This will fence more revenue this article, this citizens petition, will fence more revenue than is necessary to operate the cable department on a continual basis. 5, 10 years after this is enacted, the cable department will have millions of dollars, potentially, that cannot be touched for any other purpose other than operating the cable department. That'll be money that the taxpayers will not have available to them under any circumstances. I would highly recommend to the council to not support this, to vote against this, simply because of that impact. I know that that's probably not winning me any friends, but I've got enough friends. You know, and I hate to speak out against citizens petition warrant articles, and didn't do it when I was up there, but I'm out here now. I think this would be a bad thing for the taxpayers as a whole, a great thing for those people who frequently use the cable department. I would also urge the council that in the event this does pass, there's no amendments that change this at the deliberative session, if any can be made. If this does pass, that you follow the town manager's recommendation to implement this on June 30th of 2013, to minimize the potential impact to the taxpayers for at least 1 year. Because this actually has negative consequences. I think it was well intended, but I see through this discussion future gross negative consequences to this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I look at this, I'm trying to look at it in the context of just this as an article that's establishing a special revenue fund to fund a particular source. If I may ask the town manager a question. Dave, my understanding is that the revenue source is a franchise fee that Comcast currently pays. And am I correct in saying that that is because they are using town right-of-ways for?
That's correct.
Does any other entity, gas, electrical, so forth, pay a franchise fee similar to that?
They do not.
They do not, okay. So that's just something that the state legislature has allowed us to charge an entity such as Comcast because they use the town, okay. So, I look at this then, to me, is a source of revenue to the town of Londonderry, similar to other sources of revenue, which are, obviously the largest is property taxes, but I don't own a dog, but if I did own a dog, I would be paying a license fee, and a portion of that would go toward the town of Londonderry. And I do register several motor vehicles, and I do actually physically have to write a check to the town of Londonderry, so you assume that that's income to the town of Londonderry. And I see an equivalent of this would be if someone came here and said, I would like Chief Hart to have a full-time animal control officer, and I'm going to use the revenue from dog licensing to pay for that, and setting up a special revenue fund to do that. And it seems like that would be within the law to do such a thing. However, if we start getting into, it opens up the floodgates for, setting up a special revenue fund for every little thing that has a core group of citizens that take advantage of a particular service, while others may not use that. And we may end up with, the world's greatest animal control officer and the world's greatest cable studio. And, I'll use the example of roads. If we fenced, we may have the greatest roads, but meanwhile, other town services are suffering because we just can't afford them anymore. Or we have to raise taxes to ridiculous levels to pay for those things. So I am completely against doing that. I think we need, cable studio is a fine service to offer to town, and we should fund that out of the general fund as part of the budget, whatever it takes to provide a good quality service to the taxpayers, including what we're doing now. I'm sure someone on TV is watching me because of the people that we have available to that. But I just don't think us as taxpayers could really afford to take $388,000 or whatever it is a year and put it aside for this while we're over here fighting about $20,000 for equipment for the fire department so that they could do a better job for us, or $15,000 here, or $10,000 there. Meanwhile, we're giving $388,000 to this entity, which frankly, to me, is a nice to have. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sean, just for clarification, the franchise fee is federal enabling legislation, not state.
Okay.
Can I ask two questions, or is it after the public?
Go ahead, you can.
This is actually to Dave. Dave, so just want to clarify for everybody as well. So you need permission to use a special revenue fund or a trust fund. You also need permission to use the general undesignated fund by the legislative body, or could it be from the administrative body?
You cannot, the council does not have authority to spend undesignated fund balance. If it has not been appropriated by town meeting, you can't spend it.
Because I want to make sure it's clear that it didn't go into the general fund, it's into the general, because we use the word general, and it's people only hear that probably, and it's in a general undesignated fund, not the general fund balance, so it's different.
Until town meeting authorizes its use, it just sits there.
The other thing is, if this should pass, and as many of us have heard over the years, that cable franchise fees may go away, would this unfund the cable access center and then actually do irreparable harm to the funding of that cable center?
Well, all I can offer is that if this source of revenue goes away, then that special revenue fund would eventually be depleted of its assets if it's approved by the voters.
And at that time,
Then
because this would be a self-funded entity, we wouldn't be budgeting that. So at that time, if those fees went away, then we would be sitting here trying to figure out how to get $200,000 or $300,000 up in the general fund.
Town meeting would make a decision whether to discontinue the service or to fund it through tax dollars at that point.
Okay, thanks, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi, Deborah Sullivan, 9 St. Charles Street, Londonderry. Thank you for your service, everyone. And I've spoken many times already about this. It seems like we're always back at this same spot with the cable access programs at stake, compromising our great services. Everyone knows what they are. But I'm requesting that, as that letter said, formalizing the long-standing practices that have already been in practice for a long time, and I have a fine legal background, and I myself believe that, much like the gentleman who spoke before me, said that he may not want to pay those taxes, I would pay that tax. I would have no problem paying that tax. If that's what we had to do to make it work, that would be fine with me. This program, as I have spoken many times, is equivalent to our music program. We couldn't take Mr. Susi away from the equation. We can't take away any of our staff over at the cable access station. So with that, I can't pretend to even understand I thought I understood this. I was doing the diagram in my head, the Venn, I was doing, okay, in that circle, and then somehow I got lost. And my feeling is that you are the people who can make things happen. And I rely on you to step up, realize that to not put that money, that $62,000 odd dollars into that cable fund is going to compromise the integrity of our cable access programs over there. So for me, I think that we can find a way to put that money in there, and then to formalize the practices. Then that would be your job. I put that job in your hands because you're the people who can make that happen. My opinion is that this is serious, and we have to preserve this, preserve the integrity of everybody over at the access center, just like we're preserving the firefighters and the police in our town. That's a good town, and I mean, it's $62,000 or a little more than that. That's what I'm seeing it as. I may be lost
So it's-
in that,
So it's $265,000 to run the cable department. I don't think any of us have an objection to the $265,000. We're just trying to figure out how to, this article's been presented. So if this article said, if it just had the word appropriation in it, I'd support it. I mean, I would. I mean, I don't have any issue with the cable department or anything. At the 3.5% and the 1.5%, we can fund the cable department for the next 12 years without a hiccup. So our problem is we have to decide what we think about the way the article's written today. We have $265,000 in the budget right now to fund the cable department.
Okay.
One of the issues, if I may, is that the mitigating decision that the town manager advised us of is to delay the implementation of this 1 year to July of 2013. What that does is that allows us the revenue access from the cable fees to pay for this next budget that we're talking about. The problem we have, though, is that we can't reflect that in the language of this article because we're not allowed
to touch that money, I get that. I
no,
got
to
that.
touch the language of it. It's a citizen's
Oh.
petition is sacred, and we can't amend that as a body. Now, some people think that's a good thing. Other people might feel that's a bad thing because we can't offer some explanation. Now, the deliberative session can make amendments to the citizen's petition, but the town council can't.
Okay, and with that, I'm only going to, what I understand at that point, I would say, what I said in the very beginning, until you can formalize the precedent practice, then there has to be some way to keep this thing fluid, going just as smooth as it has been going, without compromising the integrity of a valuable service in our community.
So the option on the table is for us to delay implementation a year in order to allow the cable fees to come in and fund the cable operation this upcoming budget. Because if we put it in place this coming July, then those source of revenues dry up for 1 year. Because they're locked, they're kind of in a lockbox and it's safe. We can't have access to them. So if we delay implementation to July of 2013, which is the start of the next fiscal year 14, then we'll still have access to those revenues to offset the cost of running the cable studio. So that's one way to do that. However, back to Tom Frieda's discussion, the language of the article can't be changed. That's sacred. What we can change is what's in the gray area that is kind of an explanation to the voters. And Tom's argument is that the way it's currently written, it doesn't reflect the full impact to the voters. Because let's say that we're assuming the town council could decide not to implement for a year, but that doesn't mean that we will decide to do that. So we can't assume a decision that's going to be made in the future. We
So
have to
are
wait.
you saying that it's possible not to have a negative impact on this, the center by cutting its staff?
Right.
Because to cut any of the staff would compromise
Right.
the integrity
But
of
this-
all
Our
programs.
discussion tonight has nothing to do with quantity of
Okay.
staff or anything. It's just a matter of the accounting that we're faced with. It's going to cause us to either delay the implementation a year, or we're going to have to more accurately reflect to the voters the tax impact for that 1 year, potentially, if we don't do that. Because
Okay.
since we can't make that decision till later,
And from what these ladies, what I believe these very educated women were speaking about was that there is money there to maintain the integrity of the center, and then to formalize the language
well, unfortunately, the money is there,
or use it.
but it's not accessible to us.
But also, I believe Mr. Karen just said that it is possible to make this happen,
Right, so
even though the timeframes
Right.
are
So,
tight.
so let me explain. So there's two different articles. We haven't talked about Article 4 yet, which is the operating budget. That's where the cable expenses are in. They're in Article 4. This is Article 11. So there's two different articles. So if Article 11 passes, it has a tax impact. And in an accounting way, on paper, there's a tax impact. If we take that money that's been put away, that we don't have access to, only the voters can. The voters vote at the deliberative session to reduce the operating budget, Article 4, by 9 cents. Then at the bottom line on the tax bill, it'll net out 0. But it still has to go to the ballot. So Article 4 and Article 11 are going to have to be voted on in the March election. So one goes up, one goes down, the net is 0. Unfortunately,
I
in
get that.
our new form of government, we won't be able to explain that very well in a narrative. And I'm not taking a shot at the new form of government, but that's just the way it is, that we talk about it at the deliberative session, but the couple of thousand people that are going to vote on it probably aren't going to hear that
And
discussion.
I appreciate that, and I don't want to take anybody else's time, but in layman's terms, what you're saying to me right now is that what I want to know is, are people getting cut from the station? Is the staff going to be compromised? The programs will thereby be affected. There's a lot of programs over there, and, we need more people as it is.
Dave, can you explain it, please?
So I'm just asking you, when is it going to be compromised?
It's not going to be compromised. Dave, can you
It's
please...
not going to be,
can you
so
let me-
all this
can you
worry
let
about
me-
staff cutting is...
Exactly, it's not about staff cutting. That's what we're saying. It's not about staff cutting. This is about where to get the money to pay for the positions. It's not about staff cutting. So, can you explain it a little bit better for me?
Well, if you don't have the money to pay for the staff, would the staff still be there?
So the money's in the operating budget.
It's in Article 4.
Okay.
It's an
Article
Maybe
4.
Mr. Karen can explain
Yeah.
it fine. 'Cause
You
I
give it a
think-
shot?
I think what you're
So
asking is,
you understand what I'm saying, though, right? What
you
I'm
said
trying to-
something about essentially adding $62,000 to.
We do
Right,
we
because
do
that's what I
understand.
understood it to be.
We do understand, but
Okay.
Dave's, I
Let
think
Dave
Dave will be
explain.
able to explain it a little bit better.
Well, what the council just said is that the current discussion about the warrant article is a citizen initiative to reestablish the special revenue fund. Okay, that doesn't impact the staffing. The staffing discussions in Article 4, the current budget calls for funding 2 positions as opposed to 3 within Article 4. But the transfer of the establishment of the special revenue fund doesn't impact the budget and vice versa. Okay, it's a mechanism, whether town meeting wants to fund cable at 265 or 365, that's immaterial with respect to the discussion about the citizens' initiative to reestablish a special revenue fund. One's the operating budget,
That's the
what level of service.
formalizing the language, right? Is that what
Right.
you're talking about?
Right, what I'm saying is, the current discussion is a discussion on the citizen petition as to how the money's gonna flow to fund cable operations.
Okay.
There's a separate discussion as to what the adequate level of cable operations is. And that's under Article 4, the operating.
We haven't got to that one yet.
Right.
Okay, I haven't got to, before my time, hey. Okay, well, I'm requesting that whatever we have to do to maintain the integrity of LACTV, that we do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Mike was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make this brief. Is this a legal citizens petition?
It is.
And we've heard an explanation from the citizens about what the intent is. I'm imploring you to consider the time frame of tonight's meeting. You have 6 articles left, 3 labor agreements, a $26 million budget, and a budget committee meeting after that. I believe you're in a position to dispense with this article at this point, and I implore you to get us back on track.
Can we move that?
Thank you so much.
At the end.
Meeting.
So.
I think the petitioner
Well,
wants to speak.
we'll let the petitioner speak on behalf of it, and then we're going to move on. Ask the question. He's right. We have to move on. We're going to go in circles till we're blue in the face, and you guys may not accept what we say, So, that's okay. Come up and ask.
The part that is getting confusing to me is the article that establishes the special revenue account. If that becomes effective on July 1 this year, over the course of that fiscal year, it would be collecting all the revenues. So when you vote next year on the 2014 budget, you would know what your revenues were, and that would be where you would get your money, is out of that fund, because it can be drawn on as of as of July 1, 2014. So why are we thinking that we're going to establish like 1 year where there's no funding? We already had the 527,000, or 20, whatever it was, 500 and something thousand, and that money is there. Isn't that the money
Dave,
that
is
we're
that-
going to use now,
is
so we
that
wouldn't
money
have a
fen-
blank year?
Is that money fenced off from us from using?
What, the 535?
Yep.
It's in fund balance, only town meeting can appropriate that for a use.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the
but
voters have to.
it's
approve it.
available. I'm saying it's available, it's a revenue. It came in as a revenue.
Yeah, it's money sitting
So
there.
it'd be offset somewhere in the audit, in the
Only if the
finance
voters,
things, right?
only if the voters vote
voters
to amend
approve
the
it,
operating budget to use it.
Yes, no, I understand that.
We don't
but
have an
that's-
artic-
But
we
the
don't have an
funding
art-
is there, and it can be used in that way. That's what I just wanted to make
that-
clear.
that's the
Because that was
question
getting me
that,
confused.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
there's no blank year with no money.
If it's brief, very brief, I have a very brief,
No, really, promise, very brief.
thank you.
Just so I understand something, is it true that if the
Can
new...
you state your name, please, and
Oh,
address?
I'm
Name and
sorry.
address,
I'm
please.
sorry.
Thank you.
Cheryl Ann Victor, 289 Winding Pond Road.
Thank you.
Do I understand this correctly, that if this special reserve fund, if I'm using the right words, this just for cable fund, is established, that more money will be available for cable than is really needed, and that that money excess cannot be used for anything else?
Right.
That's correct.
I have a problem with that, and I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was short.
Thank you.
I promise to make this brief. I just had a question. Cindy Eaton, 16 Clark Road. We obviously don't agree on the tax rate of what this article does. I think that the $535,000 can be used for the operating budget of the cable department, and you don't think that way. So I would like to ask for a legal opinion from our town council, from our town lawyer.
Just to clarify, the 535 is available to fund cable operations if the voters choose to make that decision at the deliberative session and again in March.
And if they voted on the budget, would that do it? Because you have that line item in the budget for $265,000.
Yeah, the 265 is an appropriation. That's one side of the equation. Essentially, you've got your budget, all these different articles. It results in a total. You have estimated revenues. You subtract the estimated revenues from the total you need to raise, and the balance is what you need to raise by taxes. Okay? So the smaller you make, or the larger you make the estimated revenues, non-property tax revenues, determines whether your tax rate goes up or down. So the voters can vote to use some of that money against the operating budget to fund cable, which would reduce the amount to be raised by taxes. That's an option the voters have.
And they can make that option at the deliberative session?
They would have to, because whatever's voted at deliberative session goes on to town meeting ballot.
All right, so that would solve our problem then.
Well, that's one avenue for addressing the issue, that's correct. The other one is to delay the implementation of the special revenue fund and just use next year's franchise fees as an offset to the operating budget where you're paying for your cable division.
Well, this is where we differ, because you say there's going to be a year where that's not going to happen.
You can differ on the recommendation, but the options are, they are what they are.
Yeah.
And those are two options you have.
Thank you.
All right. Considering what goes into this little gray box, I believe that because it's a citizen's petition and DRA has deemed that this is a zero impact, I would like to have a legal opinion on that.
But you're going to send the email from DRA to us tomorrow?
Yes, I will.
Great.
Okay, that's all I...
Okay, so
Okay.
I'm ready to make a motion based on the way that this is written this evening. You know, just so that all the cable people understand, I'm in support of Article 16. The way that this is written, you know, it creates an issue. So I'm going to make the motion for vote for support of Article 11. So that, and we need a second.
Second.
It says here, I got to.
Right, I understand, yeah.
Understand, yeah.
So the motion has been made to support.
To support this.
Okay, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Tom?
Don't support. You don't want to support it. If you vote no.
Right, so, yeah,
So you vote either yea or nay to support it.
all right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor of Article 11 as presented signify by saying aye. All those opposed?
Opposed?
Chair votes in the negative. Motion fails, 05.
Should we go to budget?
Just not support.
Yeah, I'm sorry, budget?
Todd's gone.
This is a new petition article. This will
You
be
guys will be doing that, okay.
after this meeting,
All right,
correct?
thank you.
Tomorrow morning.
Okay, so that's it, moving on to Article 12. Dave, can you brief us on that,
Article 12?
please?
That is the first of 3 collective bargaining agreements to be placed before the voters for ratification. Article 12 is an agreement with our Public Works and Town Office staff support positions. The agreement calls for no increase in salary for FY13, a 2% increase in FY14, and a 2% increase in FY15. The cost in FY13 is $6,764, and what that represents is a continuation of the step increases for those 6 employees who are in the step system. The balance of the employees are actually at maximum step and would not receive any step increases. The agreement was along the lines of the guidance and direction given us to the council, and the council previously agreed to present it to town meeting for ratification.
So you want us to go first?
That's fine. Then we can go to the Budget Committee?
Okay, so on this collective bargaining agreement, I think this continues a trend that we started last year of working closely with our employees to be able to work with us in this fiscal time. What you'll notice here is that some of the past agreements approved by town meeting would range over a 3-year period of almost a 9% increase. This is, less than half of that, and that these employees came in good faith and aggressively bargained for what they thought was best long-term, not only for themselves as employees, but for the citizens of the town. So they were quite cooperative, and it was appreciated.
Anybody else? Comments? Okay, Budget Committee?
Yeah, sorry, I stepped out for a moment. We're on Article 12, which was the previous Article 11, correct, Dave?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. On Article now 12, we decided not to vote on it. In fact, what we wanted to understand, we had some questions for Dave as a Budget Committee before we wanted to take a vote on this. We just wanted, if it would be okay by the council, to just get a quick, our usual succinct synopsis, like Dave is so adept at providing. Just understand just the highlights once again, and just more importantly, also the actual tax impact, and if it's passed, and what happens if it's not.
Okay. The tax impact for this particular article is 0.2 cents on the tax rate. What is a recurring theme in all the 3 articles is that the employees have agreed to defer a portion of any payment of sick or vacation payment upon separation. That is now critical because the state legislature implemented what they call the 125 rule, which means if you tally up all your sick and vacation, if your pension ends up being 125% higher than it would otherwise would be, just under your base wage, then the retirement system will actually determine what that bill is and send a bill to the municipality. This is a very extreme example, understand this. We had an employee retire several years ago whereby if that rule was in effect, the town would have received a bill for about $450,000 for that one employee. That is an extreme example. Typically, what we're finding is that we're looking at probably assessments of anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 for employee. That falls into that category. So what the employees have decided, have agreed to do is that we would pay out the sick and vacation payment per the contract up until the point which would trigger the supplemental assessment.
Okay.
That amount due the employee would be deferred for 121 days, which by state law cannot be included in that employee's retirement calculation.
So this new contract, would it be safe to say it mitigates that very issue?
It does.
Okay.
And just so you know, is the frustrating part is that the current 1801 agreement was approved before they passed a law, so it wouldn't be subject to it. However, the legislature finally approved the 125 rule on July 1st of 2010. They made it effective July 1st, 2011. They made it effective a contract as of July 1st, 2010. So when the council and town meeting was considering collective bargaining agreements back in 2010, we were assured it was delayed for a year. Well, the legislature went back and made it retroactive. So, you know, there's nothing that would prevent the legislature from going back and making these retroactive to these as well. So that's a significant cost savings for the community. It just removes a potential huge liability to us.
Okay. And I just want to make sure, if you don't mind, are there any questions, because the Budget Committee, we're going to be addressing this later. If there are any questions by anybody in the Budget Committee, please, now's the time before we actually vote on this at our meeting.
John Curran, 6 Fay Lane, Budget Committee. I happen to be at a county facility today and representing county officials, and I was kind of curious as to what their contracts were. They have gone through the same rigmarole that we're going through now, and they are now, according to the manager who negotiates these contracts, CBA contracts, they used to be in a 3-year cycle. They're now on an annual cycle. Because his quote to me was, "We don't know what's going to happen next year." That's not a good deal to be negotiating out 2 or 3 years when the economy may go downhill. They also got away from steps and got into phases, where a good evaluation resulted in somebody being at the higher end of a range rather than just tenure dictating what they make. So those are things that really bothered me last year on Budget Committee when I first got on. The mantra I heard was 80% of this we can't touch. It's CBA, it's salary, nothing you can do about it. So we're dealing with cutting on the margin, which has people looking at it saying, what do you possibly do? You're supposed to be the advocate for the taxpayer. So I have kind of an opposition to a 3-year contract in this environment. In a perfect world, when we can predict, that's fine. But I'm rather bearish myself, so I don't know that this is a good deal for the taxpayers, and I'm actually on the fence. So the questions I pose are, we were told by the SAU last night that there is no evergreen clause anymore applicable in that context, and I understand there's none for state employees. The question I have is whether it is applicable in these contexts. And the second is, I'm cognizant of what Dave just said about the 125 rule, and if we can get a sense of what are we saving dollar-wise in going with this contract, holding our nose that we're going to have a 2% increase year 2 and 3, and recognizing that, you know, the employees made a concession with the 0 for next year. What is the dollar? I mean, we got to balance that out and figure out, are we actually doing better? Are we tax positive by entering into an agreement, even with increases that are going to hit people? When some of you folks on town council, we're not in Budget Committee anymore, we're binding our future successors, and that's of concern to me. We're looking now at FY '13, but this goes into FY '15. So I'm interested about the evergreen, whether it's applicable or not, and I'm interested as to, you know, what is the dollar number with the 125 rule compared to what we're going to have to pay over the course of this contract. So,
Let Dave answer the evergreen, then I want to ask you a question.
I guess-
to
I
see
guess-
what I'm allowed to say.
My question is what's your understanding of the evergreen clause? Because I've heard a wide range of definitions with respect to evergreen.
well, you know, in a nutshell, that if this contract is not approved, and actually that's my third question, what is your summary as to what happens if these contracts aren't approved? The evergreen clause is that they still get cost of living advances. It exists under certain terms. It still exists. The contract continues in effect with cost of living advances. That's my thumbnail understanding of it.
Well, when the legislature, a couple of years ago, before they repealed evergreen, they passed evergreen, the statute specifically excluded cost of living adjustments for future years in expired contracts. So, and that's why I asked, because there's a lot of confusion about that. This contract does carry forward all the terms and conditions except for cost of living and steps for these groups. So the town cannot unilaterally change an employee's health insurance coverage, nor want to, cannot change their vacation accruals, their sick leave accruals. That all carries forward under an expired contract, but there is no COLA or step increases on
The
this.
benefits stay the same.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Right.
Okay, so Dave, how much am I allowed, how much am I allowed to talk about our philosophy around negotiation? I mean, it's not really, the part I want to talk about is how we got to the number.
Oh, you're fine now. We've reached agreement, so you're
Okay, all right.
good.
So John, I used to negotiate these contracts for a living. So the philosophy around these particular contracts is to look at what the overall cost is to the employee. Now, the employee is going to look at a 7.5% increase in medical next year. So what we tried to do in these contracts was we tried to just keep them even. So that was the philosophy behind how we got to the numbers. Without getting to how we negotiated, where we started, and what we said, the philosophy of how we landed was just to keep them even.
The aggregate 4%, the 2 and 2, is to offset the increase in health coverage that the employee is being asked to contribute.
Right. The employees good point. We used to be, there was a time we were at 10% they contributed, then there was a time we were at 15. Now we're at 20. You only can move that in negotiations.
Right.
All contracts are at 20 now, right?
Most of them are.
Okay, so, all right, so
Vast
most of them
majority.
are.
Right.
Now, the other thing is last year, all right, so in last year, they took an 18% increase in health cost. So all we're trying to do is keep them flat. And we explained that to them, is that, taking into consideration the economy and everything else and everything that's affecting everybody else, and including the 12 employees that we've let go over the last 10 years and everything, just tried to stay flat.
And that's an important component. The mantra that I hear from taxpayers and citizens is, we're not looking to take anything away from town officials. We're looking to have everybody kind of maintain. And we got a lot of criticism last night at SAU, calling things cuts, when we were looking at maintaining. So that clarification is an important thing that I think the committee needs to know.
Well, that was the philosophy behind both contracts. And both were, they got it. They understood. As well as the fire department, who had theirs last year, they got it. They understood. They actually paved the way. So,
How much disclosure do we have on what contracts are negotiated in other municipalities? Because the county contract I was talking about today, it was 1% for next year, asked me, 1% on Teamsters. Teamsters were actually pushing for 2 or 3. County rejected it, said you're not getting it, went back to negotiation, and they came up with 1%. I mean,
I guess once they go public, everything's fair game.
We have access
But during
to those.
negotiations.
We're sharing it with other.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, okay.
Right, and I don't want to get into our negotiating style and what we do with them, that's all between the council and the employees and the town manager. But, you arrive at a place based on where, they started someplace and we started someplace else and we arrived here. And actually, this contract, last year's contract with the fire department, because you only can do these in stages. And what 3 years buys you is trust, loyalty, and, and it gives everybody a little bit of a secure blanket. So they understand that, we're going to what they're concerned about is, are we going to get treated right? Or are we going to get back and forth every year? we don't have the bandwidth to do it, neither do they. Last year's contract was 0, 2, and 2.5%. So we think we're doing pretty good.
Isn't there a cost associated with all the negotiating too?
Of course, but that's, our main negotiator is our town manager. There is a cost because we have to bring our labor attorneys in and everything like that. But we have had very fair-minded employees who are understanding that everybody's hurting. So it's worked out pretty well the last 2 years. I can't speak to before that.
Can we get the numbers that show that? I mean, I would like to be able to show folks who question how we vote on this, that here's the health cost, here's the, what 2% over 3 years corresponds to. Is that?
Why don't you send me an email,
Yes.
and I'll just respond
Okay.
right to it.
Yeah, it should be pretty easy. I just had them do all of it.
And I guess the question is, because one of the discussions we had Tuesday night was voting what you're gonna vote at the ballot box.
Yeah.
What happens if the taxpayer walks in and says, they look at this, whether it's by not familiarizing themselves with the conversation we're having here, or just a gut reaction that I'm gonna send a protest vote? No, no, no. What is the effect? Where do we then stand?
Well, if they vote no on this agreement, then we would discontinue the steps. So there's $6,754 you wouldn't pay. We possibly maintain an exposure for the 125 assessment, and we won't know what that is until people tell us they're going to retire, which could be as little as 14 days.
Right.
So that there's an exposure there. As far as the rest of this agreement, it's pretty much standard because 1801 has worked very close with us for the last couple rounds, so we've got to a place where we think it's fair to taxpayers and being fair to our employees. So those are really the only two cost impacts on this particular CBA.
The briefing that you gave us suggested that the 125 rule may be still
Well, I mean, it's...
subject to revisitation.
It's law now, but when they looked at it, when they passed it, they made it retroactive to a year prior to what we knew when we were negotiating contracts. So, that in itself created some exposure for us. And obviously, I don't know if it's legal, but, the question is any municipality going to spend the money to challenge it? So we just want to eliminate that question, that potential exposure and liability and get it off.
When do we get out of that exposure period that the 125 rule is no longer applicable? I mean, if this is part of the negotiation of this contract, once these are signed, 125 rule goes off the table?
Well, no, once these are signed, the 125 rule is still applicable to these contracts, but with the deferment of sick and vacation, it's off the table for us.
Right.
Because we have a calculator which we'll use, and if they receive 30% of their sick leave they're eligible for, and all of a sudden the trigger, the balance gets paid out 121 days later, doesn't go into their calculation.
But going forward, is the 125 rule going to haunt us for years to come?
Unless we have this kind of language, it's going to haunt us for years to come.
All right, so this is now part of the negotiation process, is to put this in effect, so we're not dealing with this
Right.
anytime down the road.
And the employees...
I know that they can try and negotiate it back in, but...
Well, this was not a hard sell, because the employees knew the impact, and the employees, are smart people. They recognize that every dollar that goes up to somebody else, like a supplemental assessment, is less dollars we have to provide service and keep our employees employed. I mean, it wasn't a tough sell at all. They understood the ramifications of a supplemental assessment from the retirement system.
Okay, maybe my question was unclear. Going forward, this is going to be an element of every contract from your perspective? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, John. Tom? I'm sorry. Todd? Are there any other questions from the Budget Committee?
Let's see, everybody clear? You have a pretty good idea where you're going to land in our meeting? Because now's the time. So under Article 12, you have the total estimated cumulative cost, which equates to about $92,206 when you add it up. And that's over the course of a 3-year period. I'm just trying to make sure that we capture, we have a good understanding what the impact.
What number is this? I'm
This
sorry.
is Article 12.
1801?
Cumulative cost?
Yes.
Yeah, the cumulative cost is 55,000. It's
Oh, that's cumulative.
Cumulative per year, it adds up each line.
Okay,
above,
okay,
so-
good. Thank you for that clarification. So in the tax impact, just to be clear, in the first year is less than a penny, like you said, 2/10 of a cent, I believe, right?
Right?
And year 2, it's 1 penny per thousand tax impact, and year 3, it's another penny per thousand tax
Right.
impact.
They're all fractions of a penny, but the last 2 years are closer to 1 cent and closer to 0.
Yeah, no greater than
Yeah,
that.
it's about 2/3 of a penny in each of those.
Okay, just trying to get a sense
Sure.
of that. I want to make sure that was clear.
Right.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
And if I could just point out, this, the numbers that we're discussing is for a unit that represents 19 full-time and 2 part-time employees. So I think as the Budget Committee was looking at some numbers last night, we were impressed by the size. But these are much smaller units, and so we need to keep that in mind as we're making our decisions.
Okay, so we'll bring it out to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul DeMarco, 30 Holstein. Just real quick, when I was on the council, my first year, the 1801 was one of the, for fiscal 2010, I believe it was. And I had the pleasure of being the town council representative on the negotiating committee, but the point was is that they were very cooperative with working with the town, and it looks like that has continued here, so I'm very happy to see that, so I will be supporting this. And in general, I just wanted to thank the council and town staff and so forth, and of course the employees from these collective bargaining units for working with the town. I really like what I see seems to be very much in line with what us taxpayers are experiencing in the real world. So I just wanted to thank everybody for that.
Thanks, Paul. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll echo Mr. DeMarco's comments as well relative to his last comment, which came up for discussion last night, in that on the surface, for I think the average taxpayer, and that can be debated and argued all night long, whether that's who that is and what they're going through, but I think from a general standpoint, we can all agree that the economy over the last couple of years has been less than robust. I think we
That's
can
an
all agree on that.
understatement,
So most people, I think, can relate to what they're seeing in the first year of each of these contracts. So I think there's a lot of value to that from the standpoint of the negotiations that took place between the town and also the employees recognizing that. That hasn't always been the case, even in less desirable years in years past. So I think that's laudable on the part of all the folks involved. If I can ask the town manager a question, I'd appreciate it. Dave, another thing that kind of came up last night is when we say it's a $0 tax increase and it says average rate increase, that always throws me. That average rate increase, are you actually saying that's the raise in that column?
That's the increase in the bands and the
Okay.
actual payments to the employees.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, but is that 2% and 2% the raise in layman's terms?
Mhm.
Is there any way to put this in layman's terms? Because a lot of people look at that and go, average rate increase, and they're going, that's the average increase in the tax rate due to this? And I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, I mean, we can say average raise as opposed to average rate increase. if
That's just
council's
my own
comfortable
little
with that.
suggestion. You don't have to follow it, okay?
Or you could say average pay rate increase.
Something that the average person can relate to. They can relate, I think most people can relate to seeing a 0 raise in this economy. Others disagree with me vehemently, okay, but I think they can, okay? So I like that as a taxpayer, and I think you guys did a great job. Moving on to one other area of the contract, which this contract, I think other contracts, that typically has always come up as one of the financial drivers behind the funding problems that the retirement system has found itself in, and that is public employees' ability to bankroll unused days. accrue sick leave and other types of days, and then at the tail end of their employment with whatever institution they're with, to be able to cash that out and increase their pension benefits. I'm assuming that's still the case, that there hasn't been any change in legislation relative to that.
Well, that's the 125
Okay.
issue that John and I were discussing.
Yeah.
In that, there's still an opportunity to do that.
Yep.
We've worked down all those accruals. This particular group doesn't have a large payout for sick leave. But again, when we input what they're due into the formula, any part of that compensation which trips it into a supplemental assessment is then deferred for 121 days. It's not included in their retirement calculation.
Okay. So can you, and I tried to discern this, but I just couldn't in the time that I had, so I apologize. How much sick leave is this unit able to accrue under this agreement? And is it different from the previous agreement? Was there any improvement? And when I mean improvement, did it go down? Are they able to accrue less and have less of an impact on retirement costs? Or is it the same?
These employees are allowed to, the grandfather employees, prior on rolls of 6/30/09,
Right.
could accrue 100 days. Employees hired after could accrue 60 days.
Okay.
And when they terminate their employment with the town, the employees who can accumulate 100 days can receive first 10 days when they leave, 10 days of sick leave when they leave. They can receive an additional 20 days if the employee has at least 95 days of unused accrued sick leave.
Okay. Is there any change in this agreement relative to what you just explained from the previous agreement?
No, it wasn't, because we
So
felt that
things stayed the same in this area?
the market in which we compete with, this is a very preferable provision in the contract.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that that point never gets lost, that while the trend appears to be very positive and going in the right direction, and the employees themselves should be lauded for that effort, that appears to be one area that, for future negotiations, I, as one taxpayer, would like to see some movement on that as well. You
Well,
know.
just two comments on that.
Yep.
One, again,
I appreciate your
It appears to be
comments.
market competitive, and
Yep.
also what I failed to neglect is that the 10 plus 20 is for employees who have been here as of 6/30/09. For newer employees, the threshold is 10 and 10.
Yep.
And that was changed back in '09.
Yep.
With the last contract.
Yep. Okay.
Well, can I make a comment? There's also, Mike, I've worked on negotiations on contracts with you, and so you know how I feel about this, but we should understand there's also,
Ours weren't as good as this, Tom.
right, as we get closer and closer to that level, there's probably gonna be a tripping point where, as the employees look at it, it may make more sense for them to take their sick time as opposed to accumulating the sick time. Now, when a safety employee takes sick time, the cost of taxpayers is 1.5
Yes.
or 150% with the overtime,
Yes.
as opposed to taking a payout at retirement, which is without the overtime. So
Yeah.
there is some trade-off to the taxpayer. Now, there's maybe an implication to the retirement level as
Yes.
well. So there's,
Yeah.
so you get down to some point, there's some asymptote where you start, the employees say, well, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it, I'm just gonna take it, and
Yeah.
then we get into that discussion we had earlier about why do we have overtime?
Yeah.
And
I-
then we're paying it out at 1.5 instead of 1.0.
I do understand. I'll leave you with this relative to my first point, that I think most people in our community and elsewhere can relate to no cost of living raise in the first year, given what we're going through. Most people can't relate to significant amounts of sick time being bankrolled, so it's always difficult. In the private sector, typically, if not always at this point, you use them when you're sick, and at the end of the year, the clock stops and you start over again. That's what most people can relate to. They really can't relate to this. But with that said, I support this contract as presented based on the improvements that I've seen.
We would rather employees not take their sick time, because we have to compensate a replacement employee at 1.5 times their raise.
Yes.
So it's a,
There's also a number of communities that have gone to earn time and just wrap up everything,
Yeah.
use it or lose it, so
Yeah.
you can
Private
imagine
sector as
towards the end of the fiscal year, our replacement costs for our public safety people, I'm not criticizing them, I'm just saying we have to replace those people. So on a use it or lose it scenario, we'd have a lot of folks using it, thus increasing our time on, because earn time is not, it's not defined as sick time. You use it when you're sick. Earn time is you've earned it, you use it when you can.
Yeah.
And if you have to use it or lose it towards the end of the fiscal year, those communities have significantly higher costs with respect to replacement coverage for public safety.
It's refreshing to see the first year of each of these contracts. Very refreshing. Thank you.
All right, one more, I guess Glenn had a question, and then Todd has a question. We'll wrap it up on that.
First off, thanks for spending the time answering questions. Special thanks to the Budget Committee, because their last public hearing ended early this morning, just past midnight. Hopefully you guys beat that. A couple of quick questions. Can we get, in the past, we've put the contracts on the website so that people can read through and this and that, see exactly what, as opposed to this. I asked the school board, they said that was cool. The other question that came up last night, and this is more of a clarification, I did ask Dave earlier, and he's working on an answer, but just to get it out there. What came up at the school board last night, which kind of took me off guard, because we're under the same government of SB2 or Charter SB2, whatever you want to call it, they said any dollar amount can be amended at the deliberative session. And they gave the example of amending their teacher raise contract to $2, which immediately forces you to go back, renegotiate, call a special meeting. Can we do that on this? Not that I'm saying we would, but that seems to throw...
So right in here we have, yeah, well, go ahead. I'll let you do it.
This is what we do know, is that voters can amend the monetary provisions of a proposed collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
We also know that if voters do that, then the agreement is considered to be rejected. What we don't know yet, and council is still researching this, for example, if they decided to appropriate $5,000 less, then it's rejected. What council is looking at now on the previous court cases is that if both parties get together and renegotiate within those financial parameters, are the parties considered to have an agreement and move forward without town meeting approval? He's looking at that. His initial reaction is no, but he wants to further research that.
I was just curious. The last one, which is more of a suggestion possibly for a future meeting, what the school district is going to do is they're going to have their moderator come in and explain the rules of the meeting. The only difference on their side is they're going to a no quorum. On our side, we're going from town meeting to deliberative session SB2. Is there any way that our moderator could come in and kind of explain the rules and give us a little preview of what's going to happen?
That's up to the moderator.
Well, one thing is that...
You can ask her.
Is that,
You certainly can.
We
is
can
that
ask her.
Dottie's made her staff available to produce a program to explain it. We'll be doing that, and it'll be up before.
But we can
deliberative
you,
session.
as per the request, can we ask Cindy, and she has some time to come in soon, and
I will.
possibly, I know she's on vacation this week, or
Right.
the week coming up, but.
Yep, I will.
For the next 7 weeks.
Thank you.
Hey, just for clarification, okay, just so people understand, when you negotiate union contracts, collective bargaining agreements, those negotiations are built on trust between the negotiators, the town, and the collective bargaining agreement unit. If people come into the deliberative session and decide to change it, when you believe you have a good contract, that trust is now broken. So we start over. It's a whole, it can be a whole nother negotiation. We may wind up with something better, we may wind up with something worse, depending on which side of the coin you're on. So just do understand that.
Sure, Brian.
Brian Farmer, 106 Chase Road. Do the voters at the deliberative session have any authority to amend these articles as presented for agreements?
They can.
They can. So they can amend and say, okay, instead of, for FY 14, 23,557, they can say, I want that to be 15,000.
They can amend the appropriation for this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
For just this year,
Right.
not the future years as
Because
listed here.
what they're actually voting on is the amount to be raised this year.
All right.
So
So-
they can change that if they choose
Okay.
to.
So, John, all due respect, I would just differ that the trust is broken. I would just say that if
Well,
the
we can
voters...
agree
if the-
to disagree.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree. I would just say that if the voters, if there's enough voters in the deliberative session who feel
Like I
that they
said,
want to amend
We can
this...
agree to disagree.
And I'd like to finish my statement. If there are enough voters at the deliberative session who would like to amend this, I would say it's within their right to do that.
I didn't say it wasn't within their
Okay.
right. I said the trust is broken. It's
Well-
my opinion. We can agree to disagree.
I think that that's a statement designed to maybe think the voters think that they shouldn't do
You
this.
have your opinion, I have mine.
All right.
We need to move on.
I've stated mine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so back to the council, procedural from Todd.
Dave, this should be a real easy one for you. On Monday evening, the Budget Committee went through and we voted on all the articles as presented. When you updated the article with the petition article, that became the new Article number 11, you inserted it. We had voted on, our Article 11 was what is now Article 12, which pushed all the rest of the articles out.
Right.
Do we have to re-vote because of those article shifts, or can we just, it's still understood that
You're
what we
still
voted on?
voting on, you're voting on the subject of each matter, not the
Exactly.
number.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about any technicality there or anything like that? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
We haven't made one yet.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we support Article 12 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second for Article 12. All those in favor of Article 12 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, chair votes affirmative, motion passes 5-0. And Budget Committee will be reviewing that tonight.
Yeah, correct.
Article 13, Dave.
Article 13, again, is another collective bargaining agreement. The average pay rate increase is the same as negotiated 1801, 0% for FY 13, 2% for each FY 14, FY 15. It includes the same language regarding avoiding any supplemental assessments from the retirement system. The sick leave payout has been essentially cut in half, where previously these employees could receive up to 60 days of payout, is now down to 30. There's an opportunity to cash in some sick leave at the rate of 1 day, 1 day per 3, just to cash in 6 days per year. The maximum accrual rate will drop from 90 to 85. And I think that's essentially the highlights of this agreement. Now, in response to a question on the previous, contract, there are two cost provisions in this particular issue if the current contract continues. One is that the merit increase levels have been dropped by 0.5%, and they're almost at half of what they were 2 years ago. And to maintain the current merit levels would result in a cost overall of approximately $10,000, $7,000 per year. Also, under the old payout per sick leave, by having the maximum amount which can be taken with the employee who's leaving the town employee, we are saving about $10,677 on average with any employee who is planning to retire. And again, we don't know how many employees, or if any at all, are planning to retire, but that's an exposure we have out there currently. And this is one of those contracts which we approved in 2010, thinking there wasn't a supplemental assessment. Well, this one is subject to supplemental assessment because the legislature made that law retroactive. So there is exposure, again, with the supplemental assessment with this particular contract. And this contract represents 15 full-time management and mostly mid-level management professional positions in the fire and police department. We used to have one LAEA, and the employees decided to split out between the public safety folks and the town administrative personnel folks. That's why there's two separate agreements before you with LAEA this evening.
Hey, Dave, thank you.
I'm sorry, yeah, the cost impact is $756. The folks they supervise, they have a life insurance policy equal to annual salary up to $100,000 paid by the town. Their previous contract was $50,000 max, they wanted $100,000. The entire cost for all 15 people was $756. So that's the cost we'll be seeing this year.
Thanks, Dave. All right, counsel?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, looking at Articles 12, 13, and 14, just a general comment that in the 11 years I've been involved in negotiating contracts, these are the most favorable contracts that I have ever seen in 11 years, favorable towards the taxpayers. So I think an excellent job by the staff in negotiating, and also very understanding of the employees, the context of the economic environment we're in. So I would encourage us to continue to support these.
Todd?
Yeah, once again, we'll revisit, we'll visit this in our meeting following this meeting. We just wanted to gain more information so that we could make an informed decision.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the Budget Committee? It's pretty much like we just reviewed from the first one. Okay. Any members of the public would like to speak to Article 13?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Questions for the town manager, if I may?
Sure.
Okay. Dave, the first change appears to be the renaming of a level for a position from captain to battalion chief, and it says for the purposes of compensation. So the obvious question is there any cost associated with that change?
No, there's not. The employees requested it. We expressed our position that for compensation purposes, we consider the titles of battalion chief and captain to be interchangeable. So in future negotiations, we look at conducting salary surveys, we'll incorporate both battalion chiefs and captains into that salary survey. As a matter of note, for the 10 communities with which we compare ourselves consistently over the years, I believe there are 2 of those communities that have battalion chiefs, the other 8 have captains.
Okay. Thank you. As it relates to compensation, this is one area of this contract that I think we need to kind of flesh out for the voters so that they're really truly educated, and then also for the Budget Committee later on. So that's where you have the 2 compensation pieces in the table. If you could kind of walk through for the average taxpayer the real compensation that we're talking about with this unit, I think would be very helpful. It appears on the surface that like the last contract, there's a 0% cost of living raise in year 1.
Mm-hmm.
But there also is the ability for the members of this unit to get a merit increase in that same year where there's no cost of living raise. So what is the merit increase?
Sure.
How much can it be? I know you've got percentages and they've gone down from the previous year, but isn't there going to be a cost associated with this agreement in the form of compensation in year 1, or am I misreading this wrong as the average taxpayer?
Well, actually, you're not reading it wrong in that, and this is kind of a quirk from the Public Employees Labor Relations Board, and I can't explain the reasoning behind it, but if you're on a step system and you have an expired contract, you do not continue steps. If you're on a merit system with merit awards, you continue those. So we're gonna have that cost whether the contract is approved or not. Okay? You with me so far?
I am.
Okay. So the merit levels are at 3%, 2.5, 1.5, 0, and 0. They're currently at 3.5, 3, 2, so they're down 0.5% from the current contract. And the contract, which is in effect as of June 30th of 2010, which is 2 years ago, the levels were at 5%, 4, 3. So for employees who are within the band between the min and the max, if they're eligible and they earn a merit award, then they will receive that in their base pay. If you're at max, you'll receive it as a lump sum check, not into your base pay.
Okay, so that's a lot to swallow. So if I followed you, there are individuals in this unit that will get an increase in pay in FY13.
That's correct.
Okay, because that was a point that was raised last night, in that in this particular agreement, as opposed to the previous agreement, there is an increase in pay for some members of this unit within the band in the form of salary. And for those that are, reach the maximum, there's a one-time hit, which isn't a salary type thing going forward.
Right, it's a lump sum. So
Right.
so in theory, if your
Right.
merit is lower,
Right.
and this year, compared to last year, you're actually taking an overall compensation
Yep.
decrease, right?
Yeah.
How we try to explain it, Mike, is that, what I've been told for the folks in the public sector, in the private sector, is that their two components are essentially a merit review and a possible year-end bonus.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much the same thing, although
It
I realize
was
it doesn't
that
happen
way,
these
Dave.
days, but
It
that's,
was that way. Yeah.
that's what the
got
private
it.
sector folks are telling me,
Got
so.
it. Okay. All right. So I thought it was important. I'm glad I asked that question, because there was a point raised for this particular bargaining unit. There is a cost associated. So just keep that in mind. I like the 0% cost of living. I like the movement down in the merit. Love to see that continue. But that's all I have to say about this agreement. Thank you very much.
But I don't think that question was asked in the first one. The first one is not getting their steps? They're getting their steps as well, aren't they? They're not. Okay. I wanted that question for the Budget Committee. And what about the third one? John, since you were
I
on.
don't know about the third one.
Okay.
There were three of them, and it was.
Patience, Chris, patience, we'll get there.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, we accept Article, accept Article 13 as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor of Article 13 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair votes affirmative, motion passes 5-0.
Chairman, may I make a comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
The council, we started the meeting with the pledge and a moment of silence for our service members. Council was invited tonight to honor the return of a Marine Corps unit tonight at 10:30 at the Reserve Center, where we're going to miss that. So just that thought we could keep them in mind and be thankful that they are home safe, and
Yeah, I actually told Al I'd get there tonight if the meeting went well.
so that's, so it was keep them in our thoughts and prayers, and it's glad maybe a moment of silence had some impact. They're home now.
Thanks, Tom. Agreed. Okay, so we're let me try that again. Article 14. Any questions from the Budget Committee?
Just, it'd be great to have the same type of rundown by the
Sure.
town manager, if he'd be
Dave?
so kind.
It's the exact same contract as the public safety personnel, except this group did not request an increase in their life insurance, so the 756 is not there. And we talked about potential liabilities, is that if we stayed at the higher merit pay level, the negative impact, but staying with the current contract, would be about $4,300 for the entire group, and the additional exit compensation resulting from the higher sick leave payout could be up to $8,600 per employee, again, whoever leaves and doesn't leave.
That's the max.
Yeah, just as a point of information, we had 15 people under Article 13. We have 11 and one part-time in Article 14. And in each of those groups, I think there are 2 or 3 in each of those groups that are not at max. You've got a very veteran force here, so most of the people are at max. So any merit reviews and awards would be on a lump sum basis, not within base.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick question for you, Dave. The merit increase, is there a cap? Is it 3.5%, 100% of the people, or do you cap it out?
No, right now, it's individually.
It is all by individual?
It's individual,
Okay,
that's
thank
correct.
you.
And the max is now at 3%. It was
Okay.
3.5% in the existing contract.
Gotcha.
Right.
Sorry, Chris.
Just to put this in layman's terms, since I'm still new at all of this, and I probably will be for the next 2 years too, but Right now, there's a zero cost impact. You're saying if we don't pass the new contract, there's a possible $13,000 cost impact? Is that what you just said?
Well, there's a possible, there's a $4,300 cost for, potentially for merit awards. And for any employee who retires, and I don't know if anybody's gonna retire, to be honest with you, any employees who were retired, they would walk out of here with about $10,000 more than they would under the new contract.
But in layman's terms to the voters, it's cheaper to pass it this year.
That's my
That's
recommendation.
what you're saying. It may not be in the other 2 years, but this year is cheaper.
That's my recommendation.
Okay. Members of the public. Mike, would you like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, we support Article 14 as presented.
Like to second that?
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor of Article 14 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, chair votes affirmative, motion passes 5-0. Okay, Article 15.
Authorization for special meeting on cost item.
There's really no, there's no real description other than, go ahead.
Motion to support it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of Article 15 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, chair's affirmative, 5-0.
Budget committee?
We didn't really need to do that.
Okay.
Well, actually, we did support it.
I'm sorry.
Because it's,
I'm sorry. It's
a
getting late
no-brainer.
and I'm getting punchy. I'm
That's
sorry.
all right.
All right, so what were you guys, 7-0?
Yeah, we were 7-0, and it is getting late, and this is our
I
third night
really
in a
am
row.
sorry. There's been a lot of late nights this week, believe me.
So, Mr. Chairman, since we sufficiently, probably answered as many cable questions as possible, I'll start off with making a motion to support it, and then you can turn it over to public comment if you so
I'd like to
choose.
second that motion.
Oh, Article 16, okay.
Yep.
All right,
We're just sort of
Articles-
moving along here.
Yep, absolutely. We're trying to-
Yeah, I get it. Article 16, motion and a second, so we'll bring it up for discussion.
Okay,
So, discussion from any of the board members?
I just think we should understand the implication if Article 11 and 16 were to pass. What accounting issues are we going to be faced with?
Article 16, it depends upon if Article 11 is amended. We've had discussions this evening where there's some discussion about raising undesignated fund balance to take care of the operating costs for this year. So here's a scenario in which it would cost the town money, okay? Is if, number one, a motion was approved in deliberative session and passed by the voters, they used the entire fund balance, the old fund balance of 535. And then the special revenue fund did pass, and the council made it effective July 1st. And then if Article 16 passed, then this $200,000 would be out of fund balance, which is not part of the old cable fund balance. So if all those clouds came together, or sunshine, depending on which side of the fence you're on, that can end up costing you $200,000 more out of your fund balance than you originally intended.
So, under the rules, and I know that the legislature's been tinkering with these rules, and maybe we don't have any legislators left, I don't think, but with the rules around amending articles at deliberative sessions, I don't think, we can't kill an article at a deliberative session, but we can amend it, but we can only amend it to a,
Can't amend the language,
is
right?
it to a zero cost level?
That's an option you have. You have an option right now, is that since this is not a petition warrant article, the council can vote not to put this on the warrant. That's your first option. Your second option is to amend it to something else tonight. The third option is to have the voters amend it, and that, in this particular context,
Betsy's on her way.
can take place at one of two ways. One is the dollar amount, or two, you can make it a contingent warrant article, which says that if Article 11 passes, Article 16 is null and void. It's another option you have.
Another way to look at it too is where the council was not supportive of the petition warrant article. This will also show the voters that we supported this one 5-0.
Betsy, could you come up to the mic? We were just talking about an article, and what, are there any new rules the legislature put in place about restricting what the restrictions are about amending an article at a deliberative session.
I haven't heard anything about that. I
So
know,
we're just under the assumption, Dave just briefed us that we can amend the dollar amount. We could take an article down to zero.
yes,
But-
it's
but I-
always been that way.
But I've saw other language where articles have been amended that just say to see if the voters will, and then eliminate all of the language. I think that was.
Yeah, that was ruled out of order. You have to leave the sense of the article in there.
Yeah, that's RSA 4013.
Yeah.
Which says no warrant article shall be amended to eliminate the subject matter of the article.
Yeah.
So,
That was done last year, I guess?
Yes, it
Or
was.
last year. Mr. Chairman?
So maybe we ought to wait to see how the deliberative session treats Article 11 before we decide what we're going to do with this.
Right, yeah. Okay. All right, Lisa, go ahead, you had a question?
Actually, I think Todd wanted to.
Yeah, I just wanted, before Lisa started asking any questions, I mean, the outcome of the Budget Committee's vote was actually 2-5 against. I was one of the ones that voted for it. I'd have to defer to anybody who voted against it as to what their reasons were.
Well, knowing what you know now about the other article, do you want to rehash that one?
This is another potential, I definitely would throw it out there, and if anybody wanted in our meeting to make a motion to rescind, to reconsider, and then take another vote, I'll certainly offer that at the meeting.
All right.
But I did have a question, Mr. Chairman.
But I wanted you to know that before she started asking
That's fine.
questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Just a clarification, Dave. My understanding was that the $535,000 taken from what we used to call the Cable Reserve Fund was put into the June 30th unfunded, sorry, it's
Designated
getting
fund.
late.
UFB.
It was really late last night. June 30th fund balance. And so this article would take 200,000 out of that. And is it still correct, the note at the bottom, this is the town council article?
Yes.
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 So is the note at the bottom, if passed, this article will require the town to raise zero in property taxes, resulting in a tax rate impact of zero in FY13 based on?
That's accurate.
That's still correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, just to clarify on the, where it says use of the June 30th fund balance, that is the same undesignated fund balance, the general undesignated fund balance that the 535,000 went into, right?
That's the one.
Okay, just want to make sure, because we call it 16 different names, so
Right.
we should probably just call it one.
Yeah. Sorry, I flubbed that.
That's okay, no, I'm just trying to clarify.
Going to the public.
Pauline Karen, 369 Mammoth Road. Don't you have to amend this tonight? You can't amend it after the deliberative session?
Now, the deliberative session can amend it.
Yeah, but you can't, as council.
Right. We're just members of the deliberative session like everybody else.
Yeah, it's not our meeting anyway. We're all voters
I mean,
there.
tonight.
We could amend it tonight, yeah.
Because it's not a petitioned article.
Right.
Right, because you brought it up.
Right.
So you can amend it
We can.
Tonight.
We could.
tonight. Okay,
Do you have a suggestion?
yes. I think you should make it contingent on the other one. If the other one passes, this one doesn't.
Can't change the language.
And that's
on
going to
the
save
dollars, right?
you a lot of headaches.
I don't
and
think we
it's-
can change the language, though. I think we can only change the dollars, right, Dave?
No,
It's your article tonight, you can change it.
Okay.
any way you want.
As long as it doesn't change the intent, then that would not change the intent.
Well, what if we were able to make a compromise from what we heard earlier? It seems as though I think if we're saying that this Article number 11 is going to be defeated, I think we're kind of kidding ourselves. I think it's got a lot of legs, and we have to worry about what's going to happen if this does get, as far as when it's going into effect. We talked about June 30th, 2013, how we would deal with that. But another way to deal with this would be to make this article, I didn't realize we could change the language, but maybe put this at a 535,000 with, and strike the part that says equipment replacement and cable access center. And maybe that will encourage people, not to deal with that article at all. I don't know if that's another compromise. I mean, I know what they were trying to accomplish. I don't know if we could fix it with this.
Councilor Dolan has a possible solution to
Yep.
that.
Dave, can you relocate this article, renumber it so that it's adjacent to the Article 11?
Absolutely.
So they're one right after the other?
Mm.
So that people can look at the ballot and they'll be able to
Good idea.
process that mentally
That's
together.
a great idea.
Are you going to make it contingent, one
I think it'll be
contingent on the other one
I
passing?
think it would be self-explanatory. One shows the council not supporting it, one will show something other than that, probably.
Yeah, but people aren't going to take it like that. They're going to read the first one, and they're going to make all the arguments that were made tonight.
Or not.
Well,
That's
now,
right.
Dave, how would a contingency clause work on an article like